I know you're just going around in the capital. On family, you get a feel for good, good. We're trying to be hopefully amongst the first groups to get producing. Of course, you don't know what everybody else is doing. Our CEOs. How many,
Check, check.
Let me do this one. Check 1 2. Check. Check 1 2.
This is good.
1 2. Check 1 2.
All right, so we are live on YouTube right now. Hopefully nobody finds it.
Dude, are we good?
I think so.
I feel good about what I do.
Yeah, I feel good as well.
Well, really, here, and then Colorado, and California.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Now just getting it, just going into Zoom and going into the webinar will be the only challenge I've never done, but
You got it.
we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Okay, if I sit in this chair.
That's tough.
Usually it has a bunch of.
Yeah. Why don't you all?
I don't hate it. Sit there one more time. I don't hate it because, yeah, you're good. Jesus, if you want to do it, yeah. Yeah. Am I good to shut this camera off or no? What if I center that a little more?
You see it?
Yeah.
Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Check, check, 1, 2. Check, check, check. Check, 1, 2. Check, 1. Check, 1, 2. Check, check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2. Check, check, check. Check, 1, 2. Check. Good morning, everybody. Check, 1, 2.
But when we add
Two chairs.
two, or add one will be on the other side, and then we just pull that over, or how do you do it? Fully. That's your
So
framing.
if you add two, you can just add a chair there and then leave everything how it is. I'll just
Turn around.
keep little food as possible.
We'll keep those there.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, add a chair. Yeah. But you just quick check once.
Check, check, check. 3, 2, 1, 4, 5, 6. There you go.
468.
The one,
So the one thing, just I'll tell you guys now, and you can, like, if you guys have time to do it, you'll be quicker at it than I will, is if we can just clip every one into one MP3, then I have them.
Oh, you are airing this?
Huh?
You are airing this?
I'm going to air at least the interview at the top
Okay.
on next Sunday's show. So,
Yep. I can do that for
because
sure.
I've been trying to get him on the show, and he didn't come. So now I told him, I'm like, it's a twofer.
That's brutal.
Like, joke's on you, I got you.
Well, and no, it's actually one of my goals is to do stuff during the week that then compiles into a show rather than this whole like come up with a show. Like Fate bailed on me at 8:30 Saturday morning, and so I'm like, here's my Saturday trying to figure out a damn show, and I've just lost inspiration for doing a show, like doing it on my Saturday. So it's all right.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, where's the
All right. Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
Good. Oh, okay.
Be in touch.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, boys.
Yeah.
Morning. How are you?
Good. How are you? Yeah. Awesome. There you go. Come on up. Yeah, we need side tables and all those fancy things. That's what you get for the first one, in person. So I did like 30 of those during the pandemic. Huh? Thank you. You good on sound? Awesome. Well, first, I just want to welcome everybody, both in person and online, to the first ever two-part live and online Fluence Forum. These started in 2019, but through the pandemic, we did about 30 of them on the radio and online. And when we said, hey, let's do with both, it added a little complexity. But I think the topic has been complex enough, so it fits. My name is Blaise Olson. I'm a partner at Fluence Advisory and the publisher of the Daily Agenda at Fluence Media. And I want to welcome all of you on behalf of Fluence Advisory, on behalf of Stinson, on behalf of Minnesota Can, or Soda Can. We decided to tackle this topic because I have found that it is one of the topics, cannabis, THC, that I get the most questions about when I'm just socializing. How's this going to work? Where are we? And it's not necessarily consumers or business. It's everyday people are like, how does this work? What is it? Is it going to look like California? Is it going to, And so I think that's what we want to do today is as we bring cannabis online in the state, what is the state of cannabis in Minnesota? Where are we at? How are we doing? And then what about the different segments? So with that, we'll kick off this Fluence Forum with Director Eric Tauble of the Office of Cannabis Management. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Good. Sounds great. Let's just start. Like you told me before, you as an attorney had many thoughts, and people didn't necessarily always need to hear them. But now, as the director of the office, everybody's interested in your thoughts. Where are we at in the state of Minnesota and the state of rolling out cannabis?
Yeah, not only did no one need to hear my thoughts, they didn't want to either. So it was like a twofer there. So I think where we are in the state of Minnesota cannabis, the question you sort of lead with about will it look like California, will it look like Colorado? I think the answer is no. And I think that there's a reason for that. And part of it is because California and Colorado have already done this. And like every single one of the 22-ish states that preceded us, they had, in like your post-action report meeting, they had some roses and some thorns. And so we've tried to find what the roses were, like what went well, and then look at the thorns, see like how can we avoid that. The other thing that I think that is unique about when Minnesota launched is that the sort of full, to stick with the metaphor, bloom of the sort of intoxicating hemp products had really come into focus basically in between the time the legislature passed House File 100 and even just like a year into the existence of OCM, the scale and shape of what hemp derived looked like had changed substantially. I was at a conference of national cannabis regulators in June, and there was a research panel that was presenting some interesting research on what they call heavy THC users, which I will say is a little bit of a misnomer, because a heavy THC user for this purpose is someone who's used cannabis once in the past 30 days. Which, based on my now year and a half of this experience, does not seem like a heavy user. But that sort of group of people that have used cannabis once in the last 30 days, the secondary question was, what formats have you used? And they had like one chart that was like every state but Minnesota, and it was like 17% a beverage. And then it was Minnesota, it was like 40% a beverage. And so we have this really different and unique existing hemp market that doesn't really look like anything else in the country, although other people around the country are looking at us trying to figure out, how do you get that? And so I think part of what we've been doing for the past 2 years is building the intentional design that we set out to build, but being really cognizant that this is a really fast evolving marketplace, and the dynamics are moving quickly. And so how do you adjust the core concept of what we want the market to look like to reflect the sort of new reality? And, one of the sort of upshots of having, or challenges actually, of having an existing hemp industry is that with the cannabis market, as we're like planning for it, we can make changes because we're pre-launch, or we were for a while now. But with hemp, making changes has like direct and real impact on existing operators. And so if you want to make a hard pivot or say, maybe we got this idea wrong, you're looking at like, someone has to buy new stickers, someone has to buy new labels, someone has to get new cans. And so that sort of complicates the challenge. I think on the whole, I feel good about where we're at with cannabis in Minnesota. There's certainly states that have chosen speed over deliberate design. And there's, pluses and minuses to that. You look at someplace like Ohio, where I think it's like 80 days in between the sort of legalization and the first store. At the same time, those 80 days are basically them just sending letters to the existing companies that are already in that marketplace on how they can go into adult use. This sort of flip the medical switch is a common strategy. And then states either do it in like a low barrier way where they're like, just pay $100 and you're switched. And then there's states like Connecticut that set really high prices. Like if you want to become a combo, an AU and medical, you have to pay $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. Minnesota declined that sort of approach for two reasons. One, because of the way the medical cannabis market was created in the Dayton administration, it was like designed to be very medical. There was very low product that a typical cannabis consumer might actually seek out. And so the infrastructure was relatively low. But that also meant that the 50,000 or so patients we had really depended on those two operators for access to product. And because we know as soon as AU flips on, there'll be a rush on product. Like flipping them a year and a half ago would have imperiled patient access to medical cannabis. And at the same time, the legislature and the advocates that sought the end of prohibition in Minnesota were very clear that the market they sought was a craft cannabis market that looked more like our brewery, our distilling markets, where people could start small businesses, or even restaurants, right? Like you could start a small business, run a company for 15 years, raise your kids, have the kind of lifestyle you want, and not be sort of like broke after 2 years of it. And in most states, I think we see like a pretty dramatic market consolidation in those first couple of years. And so I think part of the steady build out, part of the deliberate design is to ensure that the market that was sought is the market that we hopefully get a shot to get.
That was a great rundown. I want to continue with your metaphor.
Yeah.
What's blooming well in Minnesota? And are these rose buds, or are they full blown roses? And when will you see what you want to see in the garden?
So I think we're early stages, right? Like we're just now at the stage where we're like seeing the first buds. We're like, I think we're now, as of Friday, at 8 licensees, 4 of which are cultivators, right? So, and those are mostly outdoor cultivators. Either last week or this week, our inspection team will be out to visit our first indoor inspection, our indoor cultivation facility, for an inspection. We've got 1 manufacturer now licensed, and we've got, I want to say, 3 retailers licensed. So it's like very early days and very early start. But one of the things that's interesting to me is that if you look at a map of where those businesses are, it's like St. Louis County, Asante, Chisago, Winona, and then I think Freeborn County, right? So it's not the metro. We're seeing these businesses in the outstate. The other thing we're seeing is the first early entrants are all micro businesses, that small vertically integrated license. And so the early signs to me suggest that some of the design principles the legislature had when it crafted HFA 100 about being a craft business, a small business, and being one that touches all the corners of the state is really coming into fruition. I'd also say that, let's like really just get into the metaphor that like there is a world in which you can buy a rose bush at Home Depot, and it's like kind of halfway started, dig it up and throw it in your garden and see what happens. And you may find success. Like you may get really nice roses, but now you're gonna know that I'm really out over my skis because I told Blois before this I hate gardening. I don't like fire. So I'm like I think this is true, but I think if you actually spend a bunch of time developing your soil and then like finding like the right nutrient balance, like you actually take a lot of front end time, you hopefully get a better product at the end. And I think that's the principles we've been after, which is that speed and deliberate design are often in conflict. And so trying to find that balance of how can we get there as quick as possible, but not compromise and end up in a place where we're spending years trying to clean up what we did in order to achieve the fastest launch possible.
It strikes me that the big takeaway from that is that we learned a lot from a lot of other places, and that some of the frustration that you've maybe seen or heard was okay because we didn't want to be like those other states.
Yeah, I mean, I think the directive that we were given, and I say we, like the first 10 or 12 of us in the office, at the end of 2023, start of 24, got repeatedly from advocates, from industry, from the legislature, was like, learn from these other states. I mean, the challenge of a federally illegal substance is that you can't backstop with federal regulations in the same way you can in something like food safety or you can in agriculture. And so you really only have what other people have done to kind of try to figure out. And copying is pretty quick, right? Like just cut and paste, that's easy, that's fast. Learning is a challenge, right? And so like, one of the things that I go to often is a learning we had, which is those first early states approached cannabis, and they had to, right, for very specific reasons, had to approach cannabis, and the sale of it is the equivalent of selling heroin through a retail chain, right? So there's like 4 different points at which your ID is checked as you try to get into a dispensary. And that doesn't really make any sense anymore with what we've seen in those first 20 or so states that have done the AU experiment. They're like, it actually isn't that much different or more dangerous than things like alcohol, where we have much like lower age gating practices. And in fact, we often see positive outcomes in communities that legalize around things like physical violence and domestic assault. And so I think like figuring out how do we recraft rules so that we achieve the goal of not having kids in cannabis stores, but do so in a way that doesn't require every single business to build 4 separate rooms within their retail space. And so that learning process does take a lot of time. It also meant things like this time last year, Dominique Mendiola, who's the head of the Cannabis Control Commission in Colorado, was in town. So leadership was like, can we take you out to dinner? And she's a government employee too. So she was like, yes, but I will pay. And we all do too. And so, and it's basically like, what do you like in your system? What do you not like in your system? If you could start over, what would you do differently? And at the same time, she had just been handed their newly created medical psilocybin law. So she had a different challenge that was exploring, I think, some of the things we were thinking about in terms of launching something. But so we did that work of going out to talk to other regulators. Our enforcement team took a trip to Michigan. Michigan's interesting because when we launched the adult use cannabis market here in Minnesota, Michigan, I think, was seen as like, that's the model we want. And I think if you talk to operators today and say, do you want the Michigan model? They'll say no, because no one there's making any money, because they're so oversaturated with cannabis that the wholesale prices. There was a large operator who idled their cultivation facility for a cycle because there was no money to be. It was more expensive to do nothing, or to grow and sell, than it was just to do nothing. And so even in those sort of cases, like we've interacted with those other states to kind of figure out what they like and don't like about their systems, what they wouldn't change, and then tried to figure out if those recommendations make sense for us, and then how do we operationalize them here.
One of the things you said is what other states have seen in Minnesota from hemp.
Yeah.
From hemp-derived products, from beverages, from low-dose edibles. What are we telling them about that market, and how do you think that the strength of that market here in Minnesota impacts the entire market?
So I think a couple of things. One is, at first, I would give credit to the Minnesota legislature for the development of the low potency hemp edible license category. I think other states are increasingly looking at a dual supply chain model where everyone's licensed as a solid approach, and then trying to figure out how you narrowly scope what those low dose products are in order to get them to retail in a different retail sort of chain, so that they end up in different, not a cannabis store, but like a liquor store, tobacco shop, things like that. What I think people are generally, I mean, I don't even think there's an answer. People are genuinely confused about why Minnesota had this beverage boom. It's like a lot of things, I think a series of complicating factors where at the exact same time we legalized the low dose hemp edibles, a lot of our breweries were just coming off the hard seltzer craze and had machinery and knowledge and experience to make something new. And so they quickly pivoted into that. I think the thing that I think Minnesota is showing people, and this is something that I'm hopeful that people in the industry are picking up on, is that your low dose beverage consumer isn't a cannabis consumer. So the person who's drinking a beverage with THC in it is a white woman in her 40s, probably has kids, and is looking to make lifestyle choices that reflect some sort of like health and wellness, right? And that's not to say that that person can't consume cannabis, but the primary purchaser in your cannabis dispensary is not her. And so I think research is starting to show that there is a different user, both probably for cultural reasons, and then I think also just like there's just some people that are never going to go into a dispensary, but they will go into a liquor store. They'll go to Top 10 Liquors, they'll go to Surdix, and they'll see these products and pick them up. And so I think people have seen the sort of amount of access beverages have to consumers outside of traditional cannabis retail corridors in Minnesota and see that kind of as a value add, and we'll look at it. I do think it's worth noting, though, like as we're talking about this, the U.S. Congress is talking about completely closing the quote unquote hemp loophole. And I think one of the things that will make Minnesota more of a model is that we are regulating this space, because I think that's what's happening at Congress. Is there's a number of key legislative leaders from states that have not legalized cannabis and have not taken any regulatory steps towards hemp products. And so the response has been, this is out of control. It's the Wild West. We've got to stop it. And I think as people look at Minnesota, where we don't have as many issues, we have operators that are trying to do the right thing, trying to be in compliance, that are coming to the legislature to share the issues they're having. I think a sort of regulated model offers some opportunity for other states to follow.
There's a lot to unpack there, but your image of the THC beverage user, that fits the focus group that I socialize with. So there you go.
No, I get it too. I'm culturally a white woman in her 40s, so it lines up.
What are our challenges right now, and what are we doing to address them?
I think the biggest challenge is the one that's sort of the most unavoidable, which is that for the next 6 months, it's going to be challenging and kind of messy. And other states, this is, back to sort of lessons learned. Other states have tried to, and it's a smart thing to do theoretically, right? To say let's start by licensing cultivators, and then let's license manufacturers, and then we'll get the transporters and build the supply chain that way. The challenge is that if any point you face a legal challenge, which you will face at every single point, and a legal challenge is successful, or part of your rule package for that specific thing gets delayed or denied, you end up in a place where New York ended up, which is that they had a lot of cultivated cannabis and no retail outlet. And then you had people who were sitting on leases with no way to sell. It just becomes a sort of problem where if you try to be too cute in staging the market, you end up risking the people downstream. So we went with an approach where let's get the whole market going at once. And the outcome of that is going to be, for instance, we have 3 retailers licensed. They don't have a lot to sell right now because there's no cultivated cannabis, with the exception of White Earth's cultivated cannabis subject to a compact, that is allowed to be sold in the state market. And so the sort of messiness of the next 6 months as we start to onboard these licensees, and the licensees at the end of the supply chain, they're the easiest to operationalize in the sense that you just get a retail lease, but that's actually very challenging. But you get a retail lease, and then you have to wait for product to come along. And so I think that's going to be the big challenge, is that like we've reached an inflection point where we're issuing licenses, but we haven't reached the point where you can walk down the street to any corner in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in the metro, and find a retailer that has a sort of wealth of products available you can purchase from. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is that like, even as like we get to the point where like, yes, licenses out the door, we're doing it, it's still not looking the way you would imagine a sort of fully mature market.
We talked before, and you said, again, people really, your words have currency now, right?
Yeah.
And you told MinPost last week, 150 maybe licensees. We thought that was a good headline in lunch take last week, because of course we had this forum coming up. What advice do you have for people going through the process to get a license right now? What do they need to know? What can they anticipate?
So the first thing I would say is that, and this is something I think the office is becoming better at, which is that we've produced a qualified applicant guide. So once you reach qualified applicant status, we have like I want to say it's 47 pages. I looked at the most recent draft on Friday. There'll be a new draft out, if it's not out already, out today, that sort of highlights all of the things we see as challenges, steps that need to be taken to get you to the finish line. We also, early in the process, released what we call our Chutes and Ladders board game, which is it's very deceptive, because it's 5 easy steps to get a license, and then and then each step is like, you're now on step A1, now step A1, 2C, and it sort of keeps going.
And that slide that goes all the way back down to the bottom.
There are places where it's like, oh, you landed on this step, go back to the start. But we've also added to that a checklist to get from preliminary approval to licensure. It is a complicated system because you have to get approval by your local government. And if you're retailing, you also have to register. Those are 2 separate steps, but it seems like they should be 1 step. And we changed the law to allow it to be 1 step, but not every locality wants to do it that way. And so I think, 1, read the qualified applicant guide. 2, if you know where you want to be but do not yet have physical space, I would go talk to that local government. I would find the city clerk that has been charged with being the cannabis expert, and I would approach that person in a very solicitous manner with like as much kindness and joy as you can. Because the thing that I've gotten really comfortable with is that doing things for the first time is really hard, and you just kind of have to lean in and hope it works out. But for a lot of people in local government, they haven't been planning for this for a year and a half. This feels like it just started for them. And so they're also trying to do something for the first time. And so I think having a little bit of grace for them, but also if you walk in with a lot of knowledge about what you're doing, they can start to rely on you, and then you can drive policy in a way that's helpful. I'd also say be willing to turn on your communities to activate and advocate for changes. We've seen some locals say, we're going to do a cap on retail registration. And then there's a community response that says, actually, don't do that. And if you do it in a way that can be sort of like, I think, helpful or engaging in sort of a positive way, you may be able to change those outcomes. So we've seen at least one local government go from having a cap to removing the cap based on engagement from communities that are interested. And then obviously you can reach out to the office. We have like a general customer service line where if you have a question, we try to get answers back within a week. The more complicated your question, the longer it's going to take. And for the most part now, we're really down to like the very sticky ones. So it sometimes can be a challenge as we learn about things for the first time.
As we wrap here, there was a new tax posed by the legislature and passed. There's been some concerns raised about what that means to the market. What are your concerns, and how has that worked in other states when they've messed with the tax rate? So we are part of a cadre of states that made the same choice this year. There were a number of states that I think faced similar budget realities. Unlike federal government, the state of Minnesota and most states actually operate in a balanced budget, so you can't just spend and hope. And I think seeing what's coming with some of the federal cuts, both Minnesota and other states that are in the cannabis space responded by raising the excise taxes on their cannabis products. We're in a bit of a unique position in that we're pre-market launch when that raise comes in. So what impact it ultimately actually has on the market is sort of an unknown that will never be known because we won't have a sort of point of comparison. I certainly understand the challenges that the legislature faced with the budget outlook and some of the
the structural imbalances in the tails, and in the literally most divided houses you could have in the country, trying to find a way to balance revenue raisers with spending cuts is certainly a challenge. And so I don't envy any of the people that had to make those choices. I think the other thing I will note, though, is that they did ensure that for medical patients, you still have access to medical cannabis products and medical delivery products like however you consume your cannabis with no tax. We've also ensured that our medical program continues to be very accessible in terms of no application fees. Our registry team is incredible. They're currently processing registry applications at 1 to 1.5 days between application and approval. And so certainly there continue to be ways, if you're a consumer who this tax feels too much to sort of, join the medical program if you have a qualifying condition or a medical provider recommends you, and that remains tax-free.
The 1.5 days, you should talk to DBS and see if they can get their licenses down to 1.5 days. I want to, before we finalize here, I want to thank you, Director Taubel, for doing this. As you look ahead, when you maybe 6 months, a year from now, what will you see? What do you hope to see as success in the vision of the market here in Minnesota?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the challenging questions, and it's a question we got early and often of like, how will you measure success? What will be successful? I'm pretty comfortable at this point understanding that I read a book recently, like The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's like an entrepreneur who starts up a tech business, and he's like roundly criticized for the entire existence of the organization until he sells it for billions of dollars. I'm like, an overnight success. And so that's sort of, I sympathize with that reality, which is that this is hard to do, and it's going to be challenging, and the mistakes are magnified, and the successes are often hidden. When I think about what success looks like, I go back to the office's mission statement, which is to foster an equitable cannabis market that prioritizes public health and safety, consumer confidence, and market integrity. Already, I think we're on a great start towards an equitable market. I think of like 5 sort of components of an equitable market. Our social equity licensing, for instance, 89% of our meso businesses were social equity verified. 68% of our cultivators were, I think 62 of retailers. Manufacturers was about 50-ish. When we get to renewal, we'll collect a lot of data on our licensees and see if that social equity business cadre continues to be at the forefront. When I think about that equitable market, though, I also think about things like the craft cannabis market. Like, do small operators have the same opportunity and successes as large operators? Do we have room for both? I also think about hemp. I think about a market where we neither prioritize nor punish hemp versus cannabis, that both have a space to sort of move through. I think about the tribal cannabis markets. People say, call us an outlier. I call us nation leading in our respect for sovereignty of our neighbors. We're also going to be one of the few markets where we see tribal cannabis partnerships with social equity businesses to kind of create a new sort of synergy between people who face challenges because of prohibition. And then that last piece of an equitable market, I think about our community reinvestment grants. So much of the work of House File 100 that matters to equity is outside of licensure. It is the automatic expungements, and then now the petitionable expungements for cannabis offenses. There are a number of our licensees who spent years in prison because of something we now see as a way to help with our state budget, right? And so, like, how do we make sure those people from those communities, it's not just 1 or 2 people with licenses, but entire communities that get reinvested in. Later this week, maybe next week, we'll have an announcement of the first cohort of Can Renew grant recipients. They range in the state from far north down to the south through the metro. We're funding things like housing for HIV and AIDS patients, an accelerator for like Black Girls Can Code in North, and a number of other projects like from the Vermilion School District, Beltrami schools. And so like that too, like how do we continue to prioritize reinvesting these funds in communities that have otherwise been harmed? And then when I think about public health and safety, I'm really tuned into our approach to testing, which mirrors food safety testing, which is new for cannabis markets. Most do like an endpoint where like test for everything at the end and make sure it's okay. We're taking an approach to public health and safety that is risk-based to try to help product move quicker to the market, but in a way that's safe. Consumer confidence, we have robust packaging and labeling requirements, but we're also trying to ensure that consumers have the information they need so they can make informed choices. And then I think the last piece, and it's probably for a number of people in this room that are on their way to being operators, is that our goal in 6 months to a year is to have the best actors still in the market, to find ways to enact rules that discourage bad behavior, encourage good behavior, and make sure that, we don't have to, that we're not constantly chasing down products with the wrong kind of stuff in them or health crises and things like that. And so really focusing on building a regulatory market that incentivizes good behavior and reflects, I think, the good faith actors that we've seen advocate for this in Minnesota.
Well, I want to thank you for your time and your access, but I want to take away something that you said, which is one of the reasons Fluence exists, is there's not always people willing to step up to do hard things, especially in public service right now. So thanks for acknowledging it's hard, and thanks for putting the work in.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll get realigned here. Prior to joining Stinson, Will was a member of the leadership staff of the Minnesota House of Representatives, worked with Majority Leader Ryan Winkler. In his capacity, worked extensively on the issue of legalizing adult use cannabis, including both HF 600, the adult use cannabis bill, and HF 100 and hemp-derived edibles legislation. In 2023, he was a member of the lobbying team that successfully passed HF 100. Eric Robertson is the general manager of Lake Leaf Cultivation, is a citizen of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Eric jumped in the cannabis industry in the summer of 2022 after the state legalized cannabis in the form of hemp-derived THC edibles and began to research tribal advantages in the industry. With 3 years of extensive research, planning, and training in all aspects of a vertically integrated cannabis business, Eric is now leading Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe's cannabis cultivation and retail operations. Kevin Morelli is the Enterprise Operations Director for the City of Anoka, where he oversees liquor, cannabis, and golf. He has been with the City of Anoka since March of 2022. He previously served as Assistant Liquor Operations Manager, City of St. Anthony Village for 19 years and has over 32 years experience in municipal liquor operations. I understand we have a couple technical issues, so I want to thank people online for their patience, but the whole program will be able to be downloaded later if you missed part of it. With that, Will.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. And boys, thanks to the whole Fluence team for partnering with the Stinson Law Firm and SodaCan. Stinson has the pleasure of representing SodaCan, which is the Minnesota's Cannabis Industry Association. And it's really great this has been a long road to get to this point. So I love the fact that I am up here chatting with actually getting some operations running, and some fairly unique ones because sort of how Minnesota is doing both some things on the municipal side as well as with our tribal nations is fairly unique. Maybe not entirely unique, but I think we're going to be blazing some new ground. I'll start with, I'm just going to run through a series of questions and then we'll take if there's a few questions from the audience, we're happy to chat too. So Eric, I'll start with you. So the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe has entered into the cannabis industry through its economic development arm, which is Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures. What does that all entail? And if you maybe want to also just step back and just kind of explain for folks who maybe don't understand sort of the ins and outs of tribal nations in Minnesota, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, thanks, Will. So to kind of paint the picture, to step back a little bit, Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures is the economic development arm of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. So all their different business endeavors are run through that entity. It is a corporate politics, corporate sub-politic body. So it basically has all the privileges and immunities of the band government, so they're able to operate in business that way. But really what they're also tasked with doing is creating revenue for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe because we don't have a tax base that we can tax. So to fund our different government social programs, we have to turn to our business endeavors. So gaming is the boon that was great for us in the early 90s that really allowed us to build our casinos, build all the wonderful programs and services that we have for our band members. But we have to continue to look to see new ways to increase and draw revenue here at the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. And cannabis is one of those things that kind of came upon our doorstep. Again, in 2022, when I saw that they had opened the door here in the state of Minnesota with the legalization of cannabis, I knew under Indian law principles that really allowed the Mille Lacs Band to explore cannabis full bore. So we can do things under our own tribal regulations. So we don't have to adhere to state regulations on things like canopy restriction. So we can really expand and go beyond what our state competitors are able to do. So we saw that as a real competitive advantage and a way to leverage that in the industry to, again, bring much needed revenue to our tribe.
There's been some, some concerns that sort of that the tribal governments are going to sort of take over all of cannabis in Minnesota. Not sure if that's exactly what the plan is. Do you want to just sort of speak to the scope of what your Mille Lacs is looking to get into, and just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, we did put up a 50,000 square foot cultivation facility of over 25,000 square foot of flowering canopy. What we're also knowing is that Minnesota market is going to be a really big pie, and we're just hoping to get a nice slice of it. But we also want to make sure that, again, when we're going into business in cannabis, we're doing everything the right way. So I am a lawyer by trade, so compliance, risk, all those things are at the forefront of kind of what we do. So we really want to make it approachable, safe, and adhere to all those different standards as well. So when we're looking at the state market, for example, we want to make sure that those testing regulations, packaging, all those things that we're looking at in compact negotiations are things that we're going to follow because, again, we want to have access to the Minnesota state marketplace and really, provide approachable, safe products for all. So that's really one of our goals there as well.
That's good. Speaking to that, and then we'll switch over to some local government stuff, and then maybe come back and we'll bounce back and forth a little bit. Yeah, is there a difference between so we know that there's plans to, I know that one tribe is already planning to sell into the state market and has a compact that's White Earth. Is there a difference in the regulations that have to be adhered to, or that you're expecting to? I understand Mille Lacs' compacting process isn't complete yet.
Yeah, that's correct. We're currently in negotiations, but again, like I mentioned, those same standards that allow us to access the entire Minnesota marketplace, safety regulations, testing, we're going to adhere to all those too. I've already been testing our products that are for sale in our 2 different on-reservation dispensaries to those Minnesota standards. So when the state does go fully open, we're able to kind of meet those demands, and we know what we have to do to meet that, to meet the market. And so that's why we've really kind of built that business with intention, purpose, to create a sustainable business as well. So we want to be here for the long run. And again, we want to make sure that everyone is going to have access to our products. So we really have that focus on creating things for everybody.
Very good. All right, pass the mic over to Kevin, and you get to be interrogated now too. Well, let's start. Can you just speak a little bit about, you're kind of doing double duty today because Anoka has a municipal dispensary coming online. And also we're going to ask you some questions just about local government. So you do a little bit of both. But first off, we were chatting the other day and you mentioned something that I just thought was really interesting. Can you just talk about sort of the nature of your dispensary that the city is currently building out, as well as sort of the visions for what it could become the anchor for?
Yeah, when we got direction from our elected officials in January, We were told, city staff was told, find a location, build it fast, and build it cheap. Since then, they kind of did an about face on the build it cheap part, because where we're building our dispensary is on a corridor of roadway that's been that hasn't been a focus for the last 30 years. So I call it a schizophrenic stretch of roadway. There's different buildings, different size buildings, different businesses, there's apartments, and they're all different setbacks. And so we're building our dispensary adjacent to our current liquor store. And the city council just said, if we're going to hold businesses to a high standard that come into our city, we better adhere to that as well. So we're decided that we were going to build it with Anoka red brick. Anoka likes to use red brick on a lot of their buildings. It's an historic city. So we're going to build it with the red brick. It's going to be a beautiful looking building. And they're taking the long view approach. Just thinking if we build this, then maybe that'll be the start of something along that corridor for future years, just to make it, like I said, be the start of something new and fresh. And it happens to be a dispensary, which is amazing.
So just so I heard that correctly, a cannabis dispensary is being built by a municipality in the city, or municipality in Minnesota, as an anchor for future development.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't see that coming when I started working on this.
I don't think anybody did.
Anyway, wow. All right, let's now get into some regulations here. So, what are the most significant challenges and opportunities for local governments in implementing cannabis legalization and creating local ordinances?
Well, City of Anoka is it's an older community. It's about 100 years old. So they have a church, a park, and a school on every corner, it seems like. So the challenges by our community development department was, where is this going to be allowed in the city? And so they took the 500-foot rule. So there's really not a lot of spaces in the city of Anoka that's available for dispensaries. So that was a challenge, just working that out. For us, building the dispensary and getting all the questions is, for me, like, when are we going to get our license? That's always the $1 million question. And it's just, try to tell elected officials to be patient. We're going to get it. So that's been kind of a challenge, is trying to thread the needle of getting a license, building a dispensary, and figuring out where we need to be. And that chutes and ladder board that the OCM put out has been a huge help. I'd like to see another chute for the local communities, or we can skip a couple steps, because we are the local government. They keep saying to talk to the local government, make sure your space is good, and we're all good. We're just building it and hoping and waiting to get our license so we can get rolling, and hopefully December. But yeah, the biggest challenge is where can we allow it in the city of Anoka with so many parks and schools and churches.
Yeah, so the statute allows for, kind of sets the maximum. So it sounds like Anoka is basically taking that 500-foot from parks or whatever, which is, I think, going to be a common thing. There's some cities, I know, I believe, Minneapolis and St. Paul maybe go a little bit lower on one of them. I maybe
St. Paul did.
Yeah, okay. So, but in terms of like numbers, like there's a floor. Some people have thought it was a cap. It's actually a floor of one dispensary per 12,500 people. And my understanding is they're also rounding up. So how is that going to work in like the context of Anoka, and where does your municipal store fit into all of that?
Yeah, that there was a misinterpretation by a lot of folks, especially on the muni side, on that 12,500, and it's actually 12,501. So Anoka has just over 17,000 residents. So now we have to allow for 2 other privates, along with our own muni one. So we'll have to have 3, which is, kind of tough, because in liquor we have a monopoly, and so this is a challenge for us, that we won't have the monopoly in our city when it comes to cannabis. So we will have some private sector competition, and just with that 12,500 and having to allow now 3, including ours. It's tough because Anoka isn't very big space-wise. So we're going to have more dispensaries than we will liquor stores in our city. So that's kind of challenging for us too. So.
And do you expect to have some zoning for cultivation and manufacturing? I don't know your zoning map.
Yeah, I don't know if they've gotten to that yet. I think they're just concentrated on the retail side of it.
That makes sense. All right, I want to hand the mic back to Eric. So it's like, what economic opportunities do cannabis operations offer tribal nations, especially considering the potential to diversify and create jobs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's one of the kind of tenets of Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, and one of the things that we're charged of is to also create opportunities for band members as well. So I'm really happy to say that over 60% of the 70 employees that we have working at Lake Leaf Cultivation are Mille Lacs band members, and over about 85% of those meet another preference category, meaning that they're either of a spouse of a Mille Lacs band member, they're a direct descendant of a member, or they're another American Indian. So we really have this focus to bring in our own community members and support the local community, just not from the job aspect alone. And that's without getting into the revenues that we hope to see from the business. Like I said, go to support our different programs, be it early childhood head start, food programs for seniors, higher education, which put people like me through college and eventually law school. So it really is this opportunities for other band members that we're seeking to create, and then strengthen the local economy as well. We want to bring more tourism to our casinos, more tourism to the area. And if we can do that through cannabis, hey, we'll take that as well.
So you mentioned, kind of got into this a little bit earlier, but in terms of like regulatory compliance and public safety, things of that nature. But so how can Minnesota and tribal nations collaborate to address concerns about public safety and regulatory compliance in the cannabis industry? And also just kind of frame that up by like, Minnesota appears going to be first in the nation in terms of having, so for those who don't know, we have what's called Metric, which is the tracking system for everything. Metric, I am told, has been working on a state-to-state product for some time, but the federal government hasn't made that possible yet. However, we are about to have a tribal government to state government portal of sorts, which will be a first, sounds like there might be a few bugs in the system, but we're getting there. Can you just kind of speak to all of that and how you see that coming together?
Yeah, I mean, on the Metric piece, it is kind of one of those interesting things that we've been really upfront with the Metric people. We want to do compliance. We want to be seed to sale tracking. We want to be able to transfer to other tribes, external vendors in the state. And so we want to make sure that the infrastructure is there because, again, we want to do everything from a compliance perspective to make sure that we're holding ourselves to a much higher standard. I think that is the opportunity for tribes to show and prove that we can do things the same as a state operator, or we could even have standards that are more aggressive than the state for testing, safety, packaging, and still adhere to the things in the compact. So we're really excited about that because, again, it really fits our model to meet the state demands and go into the state market and be prepared for those types of questions. I also have two different regulators. We have our Department of Cannabis regulators at the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. So I take my kind of questions and concerns as an operator to them when I'm looking at either state laws or band laws and regulations to see, what is the best way to work through these things and how can we work together to create a more efficient, a more streamlined, and a more safe and approachable cannabis industry, I think, between tribes and state operators.
So you mentioned that you might have some stronger regulations, what are the key differences between state and tribal regulations, at least for your operation? So.
Well, I mean, I think like the opportunity is there to say like we could have testing standards that are a little more strict than the state, for example, to say that tribes would be holding themselves to a higher standard. This is something that tribes have been talking a little bit about is having regulators come together so that we can also have streamlined regulations. So when we're transferring between tribe to tribe and state to state, we don't have to jump through different hoops or have different types of products available for different clients because of where they simply have what jurisdiction they're located in. So those are the things that we kind of can look at. And again, looking at what are those other competitive advantages can we kind of hang on to with regards to the state laws as well.
It's possible that you're beta testing what an entire national, state to state cannabis market is going to look like. Also not something I expected. So.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where federal legislation goes down the road too. I mean, those kind of questions about how do you transfer from a jurisdiction to another jurisdiction? But I think as a tribes, we're kind of blazing the trail. I know we've had a lot of questions for the Metric people. They've had a lot of questions for us because we're asking them to do things that might not have been done before within even the system. So we're really pushing them, and we're going to push ourselves as well because we want to challenge ourselves to make the most streamlined, compliant operations possible.
Is there any questions from the audience? I can keep asking things, but this is a chance to maybe ask a few things. So any hands, or everyone's still waiting for their coffee to kick in? So, right here. And I'll repeat your question after you say it so everyone online can say it. So.
A lot of folks are doing cultivation, right? And offering terms like at 30. So just wondering how are you guys approaching as you're looking at selling the product into the market?
Right. So the question is, what sort of terms are expected from tribal governments to operators outside of, sort of more, or the conventional state side operators? Is that correct? All right.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the things about the Mille Lacs Band as well, is we have our own regulatory body. So the due diligence, the licensing of outside vendors in the state market, they're going to have to go through our process as well. So it won't only be state, you'll have to work with the tribe to make sure that we've vetted you and that you're a good actor that we want to get into business with as well. And so we're going to take that process, much like we do in the gaming industry, where again, those regulations, those rules are very strict. We're following that same kind of protocol and process in the cannabis industry. So it's that experience has really given us, I think, a leg up, because navigating those tough waters in the regulatory space, that's some of our comfort zone. And so we are willing to work with those external vendors, and it is a matter of, again, having the capital, having the ability to work with us and do business. We're going to be looking at all those options, especially when the state opens up here shortly, and not really leaving anything, taking no cards off the table, so to speak. We'll look at everything available to us, and look to make those kind of decisions when we're kind of ready for it as well. But yeah, those. Yeah, it would be something similar to a net 30 or net 20, just because, again, we want to make sure that people are able to make those payments up front. I've looked at what's happened in other industries, or not other industries, but other jurisdictions in the cannabis space. Problem with retail paying wholesale cultivators, all those different things. So again, it's really that due diligence, making sure we know who we're getting into business with. And then, those terms can extend as people, make on-time payments, develop those good relationships, and we see that business partnership come to fruition.
Kind of in light of that, are you looking to have a minimum amount to purchase initially, or would there be able to be kind of a range of businesses operating?
All right. The question is there going to be a minimum amount to purchase, or I guess how low or how high are you going to have to go?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Those are things that we're still looking at internally to kind of make those decisions. Certainly, we have already partnerships, other people that we've been speaking to for a long time throughout this process, taking care of our own retail tribal on-reservation dispensaries, clients that we've already previously worked with. So it will be all those different kind of factors where we look at a lot of different things before we make those decisions on who to work with. But eventually, at the size that we're going to go, we'll have an online wholesale platform, things like that, so the people we do work with, they'll be able to have to go online, get a menu, and know kind of what is available to them based on their needs. And we can work with individual clients to see what that might necessarily be on a case-by-case basis.
What is the regulatory for transportation from tribal land to a regular dispensary if they do? What does that look like? Do we have to utilize the tribal transport or Minnesota AU transport?
That's a great question. So the question is, what sort of transport do you have to utilize to go from tribe to state?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's when we're looking at our own rules and regulations. The transportation stuff pretty much models the state. So, you can't be driving around out there with the big Lake Leaf logo on the van, and, you can't be making a stop at Hardee's to get your breakfast sandwich on your way to do a drop. So it's just those things that we're going to have that are similar to the state. And then again, it would be those third-party vendors, or that's the same retail if they're picking up or we're dropping off. They would just have to be licensed with us, but we would be going through that same kind of process to buy product from us anyways.
You can personally deliver or you transport from the tribal land to state land.
That, under the guise of a compact, I will say with that caveat, yes, that is something that we would be looking to have on the table.
So this either could be a third-party transporter is coming from the state and going to Mille Lacs, or it could be just direct from the tribe, depending on how the compact is negotiated.
Exactly. We can deliver, people can pick up, or if you have a third-party service you want to use, it's all kind of things that we can look at. We're basically open the same way that any other, state cultivator would have options to secure product.
Then there's a question over here.
Hey guys, my name is Glenn McAlfresh, and I'm one of the co-founders of Fluence, for a THC beverage company. I'm curious if you could, for both of you, could share your thoughts on how hemp plays into your scaling plans. And specifically, I'm curious, would either of you, your organizations, ever launch your own branded THC beverage or even gummies?
Let's start with, so the question is, how does hemp play into your scaling plans, and whether or not either of your entities would maybe do your own THC brand? And I want to start with the city of Anoka, because I cannot wait to hear about Anoka Brick brand THC gummies, which I'm sure are coming.
Yeah, we currently sell the low-dose gummies and beverages out of our liquor store. We're going to continue to do that even when our retail dispensary is open. We're going to keep it separate. That law just changed in this last session, so we're able to have both licenses. So we're fortunate because we heard a lot of feedback from our customers and my peers in the industry that people didn't really want to go to a dispensary just to buy a pack of gummies, low-dose, and a 4-pack of seltzers. They've got their habits and it's convenient. And so we worked with State Representative Stevenson and got that law changed this last session. So we're excited about keeping that license as well. We are in the process of making our own private label gummy. This as a way of marketing our dispensary as well. So we have 2 flavors coming out, and hopefully early September. A Honey Crisp Apple and a Rum River Punch, just a play off the Rum River in Anoka. Anoka's a river town, so we're super excited about having that.
Has there ever been has a government anywhere in the country ever had its own branded THC product?
Not that I'm aware of. I know there's another municipal working on one as well, so you'll start to see them pop up. But yeah, I've never heard of it. I know there's been private label beer, craft beer in recent history come out, but not THC.
Okay.
So we're super excited for that to come out.
Yeah, I mean, we're vertical, but again, the one thing that we've chosen not to do is beverages, just because of the scalability, the amount of manufacturing required to kind of put out that product. You know, we do everything else in house. We make our own vapes, we do extraction, we do all of our own packaging. But drinks is the one thing where, you know, if there's a manufacturing licensee out there and they want to purchase bulk distillate to make a cannabis THC beverage, you know, that kind of thing would be open to us. Also, we're going to look at the market and see what the consumers demand. Do they want to see cannabis THC beverages within the dispensaries, or again, is it something better left to liquor stores currently? So again, we'll look at the market and see what consumers want and those types of products, and ultimately, you know, decide what we want to put on our shelves. But it's not opposed to putting a beverage on our shelf, because we're not going to make it, but at our dispensaries, we know people are going to want that option too.
So you're planning to buy from the state market to have in your dispensaries as well? So.
Yep, at this time, looking whether we'll offer hemp edible beverages or products too. That's something that we'd look at depending on when we can get those to market and when we want to see those on our shelves.
Got it. Other questions from the group? I have a few more too. All right, you mentioned just now that you've got some laws changed last session to make things work. That was where it was the municipal liquor store wasn't going to be able to sell. They were going to have a dispensary. They weren't going to then be able to have both licenses, and you would no longer be able to sell THC beverages in the liquor store. Question for both of you: is there any other regulations that you're concerned about that you're looking to have changed, either for rules or for or laws within Chapter 342? Chapter 342 is the statute that governs all cannabis in Minnesota. For those who are wondering, anything come to mind, or is everything perfect?
I'll just smile for a second. No, I think some of those things, like as new technical standards come out for testing, for example, if I have like a 200-pound batch of a product, of a flowered product, and I have to send 0.5% of that for testing, I got to take 2 pounds then to the testing facility for that one batch. So I feel like that could, that might be a little too much, but again, it's figuring out as an operator, what is the right number for somebody at our size, and then also thinking about those smaller operators, the micro business. What does that mean to somebody who is producing, hand rosin pressed extracts, and they have to send over a good amount of their product, where it's really hard to squeeze that juice out and get that. So, I mean, those are the kind of things I think about in the conversations I have with our executive director, our board of directors, and our regulatory board to see, where can we find that balance between operational efficiency and, regulating the market.
I'm going to flag that testing issue for our next set of panelists, because I bet we're going to be talking about that a fair bit in the months to come. So, Kevin, anything that you do?
Yeah, one that we'll be working on for this next session is allowing municipals to have more than one dispensary. We're planning on having 2 liquor stores in the future here in Anoka, and we'd like to have 2 dispensaries. So we're going to work on that one for municipals.
Oh, here's a good follow-up on that, and then Veronica, I'll get to you. How are you? I assume that the city of Anoka doesn't have a lot of experience with selling cannabis.
No.
Good to know. Probably for the best. How are you figuring out how are you learning about how to be a cannabis retailer?
Well, attending seminars like this over the last couple of years has helped get me educated enough to be dangerous. But we recently hired 2 dispensary managers, a manager and assistant manager. And they're both on a part-time basis right now until September, but we wanted those positions in place to help us with some important decisions in construction and standard operating procedures and all the fun stuff that goes into a dispensary. So having them on board has been a tremendous help already. So I look forward to the next few months and years working with them.
So would you suggest any other cities that are looking to get into this? I think there's only, you said 13 or so that are currently looking.
13 that applied for licenses. Some of them are working with a private company to run their dispensaries, and some are going to run them on their own. But yeah, I highly recommend getting those positions in place just to help you along, because there are no experts in the munis that I know of.
So find people in the cannabis industry who know what you're doing and create a public-private partnership.
Correct.
Very good.
Correct.
All right. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. So let's go here.
I just have a question in terms of like, are you guys planning to have or buy from certain like social equity, like leaving a percentage of your market that only goes to buying only from social equity, or only from women, or only from Black and brown communities?
So the question is, where do you plan to be purchasing your products from? Is that going to be coming from social equity applicants? Is it going to be coming from the BIPOC community? Yeah.
That is still in process right now. We're just looking to buy from whoever has it when we're ready. There's not going to be a lot of options right now, but that's something that will definitely be discussed as we have more opportunities and there's more options to purchase.
But you'd be open to the idea?
Absolutely.
All right, very good. I think we're about at time. Any last comments for the good of the group? No.
I would just like to add that the city of Anoka is, to echo what Eric said about their business plan. We've been selling liquor since 1937, and we're in the business to control the sale of alcohol and then generate revenue from alcohol sales. And we're taking that same principle with the cannabis space. We're getting into it to control it the best we can, knowing that there are going to be some private sector in our city, but to generate revenue from it. And some of the options that have been thrown out by our elected officials is, possibly reducing a levy, definitely going to the parks. I know some of the profits will be directed to the parks. And then they even talked about donating to treatment facilities within the city. So those are all options on the table, but that'll ultimately be decided by them. So it's kind of the same reason why we're in it. And 100% of our profits go back to our community.
Eric, last word.
Yeah, I mean, my whole goal at Lake Leaf Cultivation is to really put out and grow some fire so I can, again, bring more revenue to the tribe and support our people. That's what I'm about.
All right. Wow. Well, let's make that the last word. There's going to be some fire cannabis coming out of Lake Leaf. So I want to thank you both, Kevin, Eric, for doing this, getting you up early this morning, and appreciate everyone for your questions.
I'd like to take time to introduce the next panel. It's the Cannabis Industry Update, which we've heard a lot about already today, introducing our moderator, Carol Moss. She leads the cannabis industry practice at Helmuth and Johnson, served on the advisory board of the coalition that helped pass Minnesota's landmark cannabis legislation in 2023, serves on the State Office of Cannabis Management's Cannabis Advisory Council. Mark Matichek is Director of Production and Manufacturing of Cura, a gummy manufacturer that serves both the Vermont adult use market as well as the national hemp-derived market. He's a Mankato native who spent 18 years with Angie's Boom Chicka Pop. Diversity in things you eat. Sean Tatro has 29 years of experience in the cannabis industry, 17 years of cultivation experience in 4 different states. And Josh Wilkins Simon is a multifaceted entrepreneur in the cannabis industry, founded Legacy Glassworks in 2009, fostering a love for locally made glass pipes and through galleries, low potency cannabis dispensaries in Duluth, Minneapolis, and recently in Woodbury. Carol, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me at this forum. I know a lot of you are already friends, and I love talking about this stuff. So doing it in front of bigger audiences is always awesome. I'm the head of our cannabis practice group at Helmuth and Johnson. I talk about weed all day long, and it's awesome. I tell people this practice group has better holiday parties than the one I was doing pre-cannabis. So I'll just kind of start off. I'm going to start off with just the life cycle of the products and start with cultivation. So Sean, for people who are not as versed in the cannabis industry, when you tell them that you're into cultivation, you're a cultivator, how do you describe that to somebody who might not be quite immersed in the industry like we are?
Honestly, I don't get that question often because with the cannabis industry, everybody automatically goes to the retail side of things. They don't give the cultivation much thought. But yeah, it's a long, complex process starting from the vegetative state through flower, dry, cure, trim, testing, and then sales. So not many people end up asking or get into that very much with me. That's not something of interest to most people. I don't think they don't really care where it comes from. They just want it to be good when they get it.
Interesting. Can you describe for us what kind buds cultivation looks like currently? Or what you're planning, I should say.
It's going to be in an 8,400 square foot building. It'll be an open layout with 2 separate rooms that switch back and forth, light and dark, and it'll be LED lights and use about 5,000 square feet of the canopy of the building for canopy purposes, and then other support structure in there. And
awesome, excellent. Thank you so much. So, Mark, passing the microphone down to you. With Cura's manufacturing is a very broad term. What part of manufacturing does your entity fit into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the manufacturing that Cria does, it all kind of starts in our formulation. So we take a recipe that's going to end up being our gummies. We specialize in gummies. We also do vapes as well. That all starts with formulation. That's all the math. That's the spreadsheets that makes us basically account for water loss when we're producing the gummies, because we dose everything to weight. So it's the most important step to make sure that the dosing is appropriate and it's proper and within all of the guidelines. From there, it'll go to our kitchen, and the kitchen will produce it, right? I mean, it's a kitchen. We have automated equipment. We put all the tapioca, the sugar, everything into a mixer. We cook it, we deposit it, we demold it. From there, we cure it, we test it, and then we package it as well.
Okay. And, you're in Vermont and coming into Minnesota, or are in Minnesota, and there's nothing Minnesotans love more than thinking Minnesota is special.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So why Vermont to Minnesota? Like, what is it about us that makes this a market for you?
I think it helps that both of the owners, Dan and Bill of Cria, are from Minnesota originally. So yes, there's that. Vermont is a very small state of about 650,000 total people in the entire state. So looking at a bigger market is something we're very interested in as well. Being in the middle of the country can be very much advantageous as well. for spreading out of there. But mostly it's the market size, right? Just more people, more opportunity.
And is Korea in the low dose hemp market right now?
Correct, in Vermont. Yep.
Okay. And how is that transition going to look? Is it going to be a smooth transition for you, or is it? Well, I'll let you answer the question.
I believe so, yes. So Vermont does both. Unlike here in Minnesota, where you're going to have to operate separately for the two different sides of things, you can do both in Vermont for now, at least. So there's a lot of chatter that might not continue. But we do both currently. So transitioning to just doing one or the other should be no problem for us. We have a lot of advantages. I came into this business a year ago, basically this month, and they're already doing gummies. So we're very much experienced in that realm of things. So I expect starting a facility here and doing production here should be very easy, one for one.
Awesome. Josh. So I was thinking last night about when we first met, and it was in 2021, right before the low dose became live. And that wasn't even 5 years ago. That's amazing. Like in I call cannabis dog years. That's like 20 years ago. So we've come a long way since that first night that we met at Champs Bar, Halloween party, 2021. Talk about how, where is Legacy, your brand, your store, and talk about how you've changed it from the low dose or what you're doing, and now you're opening up your first dispensary in Duluth.
Yeah, and first I want to say thanks, of course, everybody for having us. So it's for sure been a long journey. So I started originally back in 2009, and I was taking my cousin's hand-blown glass pipes, and I started going to music festivals across Minnesota, across the country, and kind of spreading the happiness and love of local pipes. And then opened my first store in Duluth back in 2010, Legacy Glassworks. And I recently went back and found my business plan from 2009. And I forgot about this, but I'd been actively planning on opening dispensaries since 2009. So I wrote in the business plan, get established for glass pipes and customer service, quality up in Duluth, open up a destination gallery in Minneapolis with the glass blowing studio, and before legalization, just be established as actually being in the cannabis community and not trying to take advantage of it. High quality products, customer service, knowledge. So when there's a million new dispensaries that are all trying to make a name for themselves, hopefully we would already have that kind of like brand recognition. So it's been a long journey, but yeah, we're finally kind of on the precipice. So really, really exciting. And of course, just like any business, there's been, so many ups and downs over the years, and the glass pipes have taken, they took a huge rise, and people really caring about locally made pipes and not, wanting to buy imported glass from gas stations. And so there's a big boom in that. We've actually seen kind of recently kind of a little come down period and lull in that, which is interesting. And then, of course, as soon as we legalized hemp, we wanted to be on the forefront of that to prepare ourselves for the adult use space. And so there was a big boom in that. And, at the beginning, only a handful of operators that were actually like selling the hemp products. And so that was amazing business. And then now, like any industry, when you can get it at every liquor store, every gas station, there's been a big lull in that and kind of seen throughout the industry. And so now on to the next steps. But I think being able to navigate and really be able to properly plan for just the normal ebbs and flows of business.
To reach your goals from a 2009 business plan is excellent. Great job. So Sean, one of the big things that people talk to me about, and we talked about a little bit more with Will and especially Eric earlier, supply. And what is going to be put on the shelf for these stores that are now starting to open or get close to opening? Can you describe a little bit about the process that it would take to, once you start, to actually have something to either sell or to manufacture? What time frame are we looking at to get supply on the shelves from when a cultivator gets going?
Well, that's why last year I was spending a lot of time down at the Capitol begging the OCM to give cultivators their licenses first so we could kind of get going, because we're the start of the supply chain. But yeah, from the second you could turn on your lights, it's at least a 5-month process to where you could push out your first crop and make it ready for sale. But then you're on a continuous pattern after that, depending on how your grow is set up. Ours in particular will be harvesting once a month. So it'll take about 5 months to get to market with our first batch, and then we'll be producing monthly after that.
And so what you're talking about is all indoor cultivation, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and is Kind staying with all indoor cultivation?
Yep.
Okay. Outdoor is a little bit more challenging
From
in
my
Minnesota.
experience in the market, the customer prefers indoor much more than outdoor, I don't think.
Yeah, expand on that.
Just through the years, it's gotten to be where high quality, you know, it used to be Mexican brick weed that eventually has now gotten to the point where everybody's a connoisseur effectively, and they all want the best of the best effectively. Or
Is it because you control more? You can control more of the factors in the
it's
indoor.
the environmental control that can give you that quality. And
Okay,
yeah.
great. So, Mark, going back to you, this Angie's Boom Chicka Pop is very interesting.
Sure.
Did you, when you were there, like, was your goal, like, did you have goals like Josh that you wanted to be in cannabis?
No.
So talk about what you learned or what the
Yeah.
skills that you had at Angie's translate to what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Angie's Boom Chicka Pop started in Mankato, which is why I included that in my bio. And I started working there when I was in high school, outdoor over a cauldron with a big wooden stick, making popcorn at baseball games and little kids festivals and things like that. And I got to see that business really grow and grow with it. And that was just a really important part of my growth process within my career. I didn't want to be in manufacturing my entire life when I was 21 years old, but the opportunities kept coming and coming, and they a huge company ended up selling to ConAgra in 2017. So fast forward to a year ago, my former boss, Dan Bastian, who's one of the founders of Angie's Boom Chicka Pop, knew my boss now, Bill Laufey, and he wanted somebody to run operations for his cannabis company that he wanted to start in Minnesota. So we had coffee for an hour and a half, effectively, I guess, an interview, kind of. And we just got to know each other. And I saw a lot of the same things in Bill that I saw in Dan and his wife, Angie, just really incredible, good people who want to do the right thing and make a really good business, treat their employees the right way, make a great product. And that's how I got on board. I had no intention of this happening. It did. And I'm very grateful for it, honestly.
So how are the skills or expertise from Angie? Like, talk about what you learned or what you were able to do there and how it translates.
Yeah. So in the food manufacturing world, there's a lot of certifications and regulations and policies and procedures you have to follow, right? We are held accountable to those things. The most baseline one is called GMP, or Good Manufacturing Practices. There's another level called SQF, Safe Quality Foods, which is something that Costco requires you to have, Walmart, these large companies. If you don't have it, they won't talk to you, right? So we at Korea in Vermont right now, that facility got its GMP certification back in May. So we are very much pushing to be the most adult business out there in the cannabis space. A lot of people have a stigma about what a cannabis company is and how much fun it must be to work there. We're a professional outfit that does food manufacturing the right way. And the things I learned from actually doing food manufacturing in like a chip, snack food industry is really applicable and really important to having people understand that this is food, right? We have to make this product with food safety in mind, so we're not getting people sick the same way you make popcorn or Doritos or Fritos, whatever it might be.
Excellent. So Josh, we are at a point in this whole scheme where most people are done with past the preliminary license part, and now we're really moving forward. What has been one of your biggest challenges post application?
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot of challenges out there. I guess one of the first big ones, and not just ourselves, but people across the industry that I hear from on a daily basis, is right now for commercial real estate, especially in the Twin Cities suburbs, it's a really, really tight market. You're talking about 5%, maybe up to 10% vacancy rate. And then to compound that, you have 99% of business owners, landlords that are just a flat, hard no to renting to a cannabis company. Obviously, I completely disagree with that approach, but I also can see where they're coming from. If you are constantly renting your space, and you could take a risk on a cannabis company opening a dispensary, or you could wait 3 weeks and it's going to be a Jimmy John's, I can see why people would wait. And so then I think, the way the state licensed with a ton of micro businesses is great. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have small business. We wanted to have craft. I think that in terms of opening a cannabis business, when you can look at all the different things, a dispensary retail actually is the most affordable. And at that, it's still not affordable. But I think you're going to see a lot of these micro businesses, and we have seen them as like hyper focused specifically originally on the retail like side of things. So then you have a ton of businesses all competing for these one or two properties in communities that are the Goldilocks zone, that there is a place to rent and you have a building owner and landlord that's like willing to rent. So I think that's a huge challenge. On the regulatory side of things, it's a heavy lift, that final plan of record. It's a lot. And with that final plan of record, what the OCM is asking for kind of is all of your standard operating procedures, how you're going to run your business kind of for years to come, including, very, very specific things like who's going to be your e-commerce vendor if you like have one. And so it kind of forces you, which is probably a good thing for a regulated market, but it forces you to make some decisions that you might not have been ready for because you're putting it in that final plan of record. And then it's a pretty big process to go amend that final plan of record afterwards. So I think that's a big hurdle. And then, I think everyone in the cannabis business has experienced this. Fundraising, raising capital is incredibly hard. So this is not 10, 15 years ago where there was a lot of Silicon Valley money, a lot of private equity that was like, oh, we can have a huge return on our investment. Let's invest into cannabis. And so it's a lot of kind of the friends and family like approach. And it's a risky investment. Across the country, you see over 90% of cannabis businesses failing within the first couple of years. So there's this bigger perception like, oh, it's a gold rush. Like if you can get a license, you have a team and got a spot, like you're going to be millionaires for life. That's of course not the case. So raising capital is tough. And then I think a lot of people, especially on the retail side, don't understand kind of how fast these numbers are going to add up. So, you could open up a very basic non-cannabis retail, depending on the industry, for $40,000, $50,000. That's not the case with cannabis. Many things, from your camera requirements, needing to continuously record for over 3 months and have on file, secure badge access doors on the inside and outside of kind of every door in the facility, and then the vault and basically the restrictions needed get very, very expensive fast. And I'm for sure worried about a lot of our micro friends, only being able to raise $75,000, $100,000, getting into a long-term lease and getting into this build out, and then there's no money left and they can't finish it. So I think I'm very concerned, and we should be as an industry concerned on that.
Yeah, that's always a big concern, especially the lack of capital. And I believe we've talked about it. People don't realize that if you take on personal debt for your cannabis business and that fails, you can't file for bankruptcy. You're stuck with that debt for the rest of your life because that's debt incurred in the commission of the crime in the eyes of the federal government. So it is really difficult. One difficulty a lot of my retail clients are having is our local governments. Have you had any difficulties with local governments, and if so, with what?
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge hurdle too. A lot of local governments, it's of course so new to them, which I think was discussed earlier. And it's really like the whole what came first, the chicken or the egg, with the retail registration, with the zoning approval. And unfortunately, there's really no good way to do it that I've been able to come up with, even as a potential legislative fix. So like, for example, my Woodbury location, of course, I knew that going into that, I would take an inherent risk, of opening a store, planning to be a dispensary before there was zoning, before there was rules in place. And with that, I spent a ton of money on the build out, and then basically having to be able to go to the council, go to the mayor, go to planning, go to zoning, and like pitch the case on why, when they're crafting a zoning ordinance, my location and other locations should be approved. And then on the retail registration side of things, with that first, the chicken or the egg, I of course feel like personally, with having that location already built out, ready for that final inspection, ready to flip the lights on and sell recreational cannabis, that I should be able to get a retail registration before someone that has just signed a lease on a place and hasn't even started their like architectural plans. On the flip side, I totally understand, and I have tons of friends that are going through this right now. How can you go to a new community and sign a lease and start a build out without knowing if you're going to get that retail registration, because they're not issuing them until it's finally inspected, you've met all the building code, you have your license. And we're finding right now that people are literally racing in communities and telling their general contractors, like, how much do I have to pay you to have a night crew working 24 hours a day? Because if this isn't done, I'm going to get capped out and I'm going to have lost everything. And like, we can see the construction going down the street. I'm racing for that last license before it's capped, and our construction has to beat them. And that's like a position that no one should ever have to like be in. Overall, with the local governments, I think it's just a huge lack of education, and they are looking for people to educate them. So for example, in Woodbury, on kind of their first draft ordinance, they put the zoning for cannabis retail in some very specific high traffic retail areas, which was great. But how they had it laid out was that that was only for a retail license. So then a micro business or a mezzo business with a retail endorsement could not open up in those high traffic places where you want to be. And a micro or mezzo with the retail endorsement would have to have their retail in the industrial park, which no one wants to have a retail store in there. And so, for example, I, went to the mayor of Woodbury, and it was her understanding, that you would have, no matter what, if you wanted a retail store, you would have a retail license. And there just wasn't, especially these local governments, they're working full-time jobs. They're, they have to be experts on so many local topics, and they're just not there on cannabis. So when I was able to explain to the mayor, who's also on the council, that no, you can have a retail endorsement on a micro or mezzo, it was like a no-brainer. Yeah, we should allow those license types. Kind of on that same vein, other members of the Woodbury Council could only picture a micro or mezzo with retail as that craft brewery model where they're making their beer, have the retail right on site, and had no idea you could have different locations. So they were kind of on that concept of, we can't have cultivation in the middle of a strip mall in Woodbury. Of course, that's understandable, but they didn't know that you could have different locations. So they thought that if there was a micro or mezzo, they'd have their cultivation right there next to the retail. So I found that it's a lot of, just about education on that piece.
Very good. Sean, moving back to you, a lot of people think their buddy grows the best weed. And I try to warn people that being a good grower does not equal a good business. Talk a little bit about what you guys are doing to continue to be that good grower. Like, what goes into it, but so that you can have it at a commercial scale.
Well, first of all, every grower is the best grower. Just ask them, they'll tell you. As far as what it takes to grow the best product, it's mainly genetics and the environment. That's where you do an indoor cultivation, because you can control the environment so well. And you're trying to create a stable, consistent environment. And then, of course, bring good genetics in. Yeah. Even a great grower with terrible genetics would end up with terrible product, or a good grower or great bad grower with good genetics could turn out terrible product. So you're kind of looking for a mixture of very good genetics and environment, and just maintaining stability and humidity, temperature, CO2 levels consistently throughout. And then I think a big part of where people go wrong is rushing the dry cure process at the end and trying to get stuff to market, where that's just as important as the cultivation portion is taking your time with the dry and cure. And of course, trimming is god awful, but you have to do it and get through that process. And
so talk a little bit, if you could, about what you mean by genetics.
So each plant, each strain of cannabis, it has different characteristics and environments that it thrives in. Kind of like I'm Nordic, so
switch from low dose in your stores to getting ready for rec? What do you expect or think of?
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. And I think actually one of the reasons that Minnesota was able to legalize that first time that there was a DFL trifecta was because of the low dose market. And a lot of folks that might have previously been opposed to it and talking to their local politicians to vote against it were now kind of on board through THC beverages at the Italian restaurant and at the grocery store. So I think that's a huge piece there. In terms of kind of the transition, so one of the things that I have personally fought for at the legislature when HF 100 was originally working its way through all the committees, the original text had edibles specifically capped at 100 milligrams. And I looked at that and I thought, well, there's not a night and day difference between a 50 milligram and 100 milligram. And with knowing how hard it is, like I mentioned earlier, how many cannabis businesses fail across the country, and no one knows what's going to happen in Minnesota because no other state has legalized with such a robust intoxicating hemp market. And so one of the things I fought for at the legislature and was successful at was to bump that 100 milligram cap up to 200 milligrams for edibles. That's what Michigan has. And then that really makes a night and day difference between a 50 and a 200 milligram. I suspect after, probably the first year and a half where there is a good supply of distillate after a lot of outdoor folks have got some acres up and some autoflowers, I suspect that you'll find at your gas station, at your liquor store, a 50 milligram pack of edibles actually end up costing pretty similar to a 200 milligram pack at a dispensary. So will liquor stores, stuff like that, still be able to sell a decent amount of hemp edibles? I think so. On that convenience factor, people like the brands, they're already there. But I think when people really start to look at those prices, I think you will see a little bit of the waning on that hemp market, because you'll be able to get more bang for your buck at a dispensary. The folks that I'm worried about, and a lot of these are my friends as well, as the people that have positioned a retail store just on the hemp space. I think those folks are going to come into some serious problems as the market turns on, as opposed to the liquor store gas stations that have all those other sources of revenue.
Yeah, I think your comment in there about when the low dose came on and local governments kind of freaked out, I find it funny because Anoka was one of those local governments that freaked out and put up roadblocks, and now they're here with their municipal dispensary. Not that I feel bitter about that, but
I would add that I do think that, and the municipals are going to have a tough road ahead. I think as a general principle, you should be able to purchase cannabis as easily as possible throughout, all of the state of Minnesota, especially rural, greater Minnesota. And so I think there is some real pros, to little small towns being able to have a municipal dispensary, because otherwise people might be driving, 100 miles to the dispensary. What I do foresee as challenges on the municipal side, I don't think anyone's answered the question on federal money and federal regulations, and is that for risk? And then also there's just kind of how business practices. So for example, if Woodbury would open up a municipal dispensary and I have a dispensary open in Woodbury, and they give me a parking ticket, is that unfair business practices because I'm their competitor on the local side? So I think there's some serious questions that haven't been answered on the municipal, and it'll be interesting to play out. We've only seen this, I think, in one town in Oregon for municipal, and that experiment stopped. So Minnesota cutting the way with new things, but it'll be interesting to see how it all rolls out.
Excellent. So, Sean, getting back to the cultivation, is Kind thinking about also doing medical?
No, we're focusing on adult use and just trying to get to our maximum canopy limit that we can get to as soon as possible. And
okay. And has there been any unforeseeable or roadblocks that you guys have come across that have been really difficult? I know we talked a little bit with Mark and Josh. How about for the cultivation side?
I mean, the whole thing is a roadblock in Minnesota. No facility here was built to handle cultivation, so they don't have the power, and then finding the zoning, city approval, getting all of that to hit one area is very tough. So like with our building specifically, we had to get a conditional use permit. A lot of the cities, some of the cities have real clear zoning and whatnot, but a lot of them kind of want to make you jump through hoops, and then you're waiting for months for city council, planning commissions, whatnot. And then through all that, almost no building in Minnesota has the power required to, so you're going to have to get a power upgrade and whatnot.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask that. A lot of people are in the preliminary application and they're looking for buildings. So what were some of the things that Kind was looking at when it was trying to decide where to locate?
I guess city approval. Like Eric had kind of said that a lot of the cities, you can tell the more knowledgeable you are when you approach them, they're much more willing to work with you.
I always say bring donuts.
Yeah. They even say that they have people coming in that don't really seem like they have any idea. They don't have much than belief in those people, I suppose, following through. So the better you can present yourself and seem at least knowledgeable really helps. And I don't know, the condition of the building is important as far as maintaining a good environment. You want a newer building and.
Now, did the building that you guys selected, were you, did you have to put in more power, more water supply? And one of the things that I think might be a stumbling block for a lot of cultivators is environmental issues and regs that cultivators have to go through that's not really known. Have you looked at those, or have you put those into your calculation on how you're going to operate your business?
Yeah, luckily the building that I stumbled upon, I mean, we searched through hundreds of buildings all over the state and finally found a city that was willing to work with us. The building owner was willing to work with us. It had everything you needed except for the power. And luckily it's a smaller power company in that area that was really willing to work with us and easy to get a hold of, not very bureaucratic. So we were able to get through everything reasonably quick. And yeah, I mean, I've poured through all the rules and regulations 20 times. So I know everything like the back of my hand, and we're going to
Okay, well, let me stump you. No, just kidding.
Lay it on me.
So while you were studying those, did you come across any that you were like, this doesn't make sense, this isn't, when I talk to OCM about their regs, I try to talk to them about their cost benefit ratio, like what's it going to cost and how much is it going to benefit? When you were doing all that, were you looking at, did you come across anything where like, this doesn't make sense or it's too costly?
The main thing I would say is how much of your batch you have to give up for testing.
Yeah,
is
that
kind
is
of crazy.
yeah.
That it would be required that much. But other than that, it's relatively in the ballpark of other states I've operated in. So there was nothing that really stood out to be.
That's a positive, right?
Yeah. Actually, it honestly seems like they're a little more lenient on a lot of the functional things. It's just a lot more record keeping and data retention,
And what other states have you worked in?
Colorado, California, and Michigan.
Okay, so you have other states to compare to as you get up and running in Minnesota. Okay. Any thoughts in comparison to the other states?
I think it's a little more lax on a lot of things. Well, California, for instance, is very stringent on the environmental things and whatnot. And like getting a power upgrade out there is like a years long process, where here it's a month long process or couple months, so I don't know. Overall, I think Minnesota's a good place to start a cannabis business.
Well, we do like to be special.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one small note to add on the testing, and I'm no testing expert by any means, but I know that the OCM specifically put all their testing requirements outside of 342, outside of the official rules, because they know that they're going to need to change like their standards. And if it was in rules, which a lot of other states you have, then you're talking about a year-long process like we saw for the original rules, administrative law judge, public review. And so they, from my understanding, they did this on purpose to be able to be nimble and flexible with these testing standards. So what I would encourage, and I'm encouraging folks on that side of things, is as soon as there's something that doesn't seem right, be reaching out to the OCM right away with how to make that better, what the change looks like. backed on, data from other states that are doing it right. And one thing that concerns me on testing is some states, like you've seen Nevada, where they have to like radiate all of their like cannabis products to be able to meet a testing standard that isn't actually there for public safety. And we definitely don't want to have our cannabis nuked in Minnesota. So I would encourage everybody to reach out when you see those problems.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, a lot of us were involved in the rules process and gave public comments. That was an expedited rulemaking. Regular rulemaking takes much, like twice, if not more, longer period of time. So they don't have that flexibility, like you just referenced. So if we do want to change the rule, it's a big task. So that's a good point. Thank you. So Mark, going back to you, what were some of the, I know Bill was the one probably looking for the building, but did you have those same problems trying to find real estate where you guys could be located? And what were you looking for, and what challenges did you have?
Yeah, I think we got really lucky, to be honest. We looked at probably between 4 and 7 buildings. I went along for a lot of those tours, and coming from my background, the things I look at is like, if you tour a building with me, I'm just like staring at floors and ceilings the entire time, because that's a lot of the most important parts about food manufacturing, is not having harborage areas. So you don't want a lot of cracks on your walls, your floors. How easy is the ceiling to clean? Because you do have to clean ceilings, and ductwork and all that has to be done on a schedule. All those things are really important for the food safety aspect, the quality aspect of the food. So that's the first thing I always look for personally. Location was a big deal for us as well. We wanted to make sure that we were close enough to the metro area that we could possibly bring out people who would want to work in cannabis to where our location was. Obviously, the local government, to make sure that they were a friendly partner in this. And then ultimately space, right? We need to have enough space for all of our equipment, for storage, for packaging. Is it easy to get to and get out of for distribution? All those things factor in. And then we also looked at having too much space and potentially cohabitating as well, and blocking things off, and who would want to partner with us to do that.
Excellent. So I have a couple more questions, but if there's any questions from the audience, be happy to take any.
Kind of in line with the cultivation piece, I know that there's a date where December 1st, you're not going to be able to bring in outside genetics. What are your concerns from that, of limiting possible seed from other states or around the world coming in to be able to create the best product in flower?
So the question from Aaron from Canajoy is regarding cultivation. So in the rules, there's a magic December 1st, where everything that comes.
Immaculate conception dates. Yeah, that's something we were talking about.
Yeah, we were just talking about it, about how after December 1st, all your clones and seeds have to come from licensed realtors or cultivators. So can you talk about Aaron's concern about what that means for genetics?
Well, that was a major part of our reason of pressing so hard to get going early, because I have my own genetics in other states that I would like to introduce. So, and don't worry, when the time comes, I'll take care of you, you know. That's why we wanted to get going. That is a major part of it. So a reason to really hurry to get going before that date, so you're able to kind of skip by that. Eric's not here anymore, right?
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Stephanie.
Just out of curiosity, do you guys at all see any sort of change in the future for higher level edibles, such as like in a Colorado-based market where you're getting into the 1,000, 2,000 milligram per package level? Do you see anything like that happening here sometime?
Yeah, so the question from Stephanie was manufacturing, and whether, Mark, you guys see getting into the higher dosing edibles. Stephanie referenced Colorado, where they have 1,000 milligrams or even higher. Can you speak onto that?
Yeah, and the way that our business operates is we are a co-manufacturer, right? We do not have a brand that would appear in your dispensary. So businesses come to us with a manufacturing need, and then we fill that need. So to answer your question, if somebody came to us and wanted to do that, we would say absolutely. Like, where's the formula? How do you want to do this? And start that conversation. So yeah, absolutely, we'd be on board for that.
On the legality side of things.
Well, I think the legality side, just to add to that, is I don't think there's a limit on THC for medical edibles. So they can produce the higher dosage if it's going to be sold through the medical program. I don't know if it's unlimited, but it's much higher.
So sorry to clarify that, though, we would not be doing the medical side of things. So no.
But yeah, if Minnesotans want to see higher than 200 milligrams, start talking to your state reps and state senators, and let's push it at the legislature. I pushed originally for 200 milligrams because I thought it was more likely to pass than saying unlimited or saying 1,000, because we had Michigan next door at 200 milligrams. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely think there should be no limit on how far we can go.
And that's a nice segue to what I was going to ask next. So Senator Lindsey Port always brings up that prohibition for alcohol was over 100 years ago, but they still do alcohol every year at the legislature. So we expect every year at cannabis to come up at the legislature. And Josh, you are very active in St. Paul. That's how I got to know you first. Like, what are some things that are goals or topics for you, or maybe that you want to see OCM address at the next legislative session?
Absolutely. First and foremost, and it's going to be a heavy lift, but bringing that tax rate down from 15% back to 10. You know, a 50% increase was absolutely absurd with an industry that hasn't even started. And then you compare that to liquor, which isn't always a fair comparison, but liquor, I know there's different steps where there's taxes along the way, but you're basically looking at an effective tax rate of about 2%. So 2% on liquor to 15% on cannabis stacked on top of local is just wild. And right in Chapter 342, it says that the Office of Cannabis Management must eliminate the illicit market. And when you see places like Minneapolis, Duluth with some of the higher tax rates going to be about 25%, they're not even going to make a dent in the illicit market. A bunch of social equity, small business, micro businesses are going to go out of business because the taxes are just too high. So that's first and foremost. I personally have been pushing since HF 100 and will continue to allow for cannabis consumption lounges, and very passionate about that. That again is a very, very heavy lift. It's amending the Clean Indoor Air Act, which is tough, but the cannabis consumption lounges, and I don't even personally want to operate one. I just want to go to one to enjoy. You know, if you can go to a bar to enjoy, why can't you go to a consumption lounge? And to be clear, that's more than drinking a THC beverage. That's actually, you know, combusting inside of a building. So, but there's so many like reasons to do that. Like, one of, again, the main tenets of legalization was to right the wrongs on the war on drugs and the folks that have been disproportionately impacted by prohibition. But now you have almost every community, including more liberal areas like Duluth, ban public consumption in parks, sidewalks, basically anywhere. And then you have a lot of folks that live in multifamily housing. That's already banned. Their friends are also in multifamily housing. You can't consume in your car, which you shouldn't be able to, but it's still basically making it so you have to be upper class, you know, to be able to enjoy legalization, and that should just not be the case. So that's where consumption lounges can come into place. Also, we want to be able to take folks that want to enter the cannabis market on the business side of things and can't scrape together $1 million+ that you need for kind of the most basic thing, and be able to start small and grow their business to be able to make it in the market. And a consumption lounge is just a perfect place for that. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of coffee shops available across the state for rent. So it's, you know, renting a coffee shop, a little bit of an HVAC lift, but you can start a business without a massive capital like upfront. So that's kind of two of my biggest pieces.
Yeah, and circling back to your first point on the tax, not only did they increase the tax by 50%, they took away the 2% of the tax that was going to local governments that were doing the registration and compliance checks. My thoughts, I would have rather have them get more of the tax to incentivize to allow our businesses to come into their community. Now whatever little they got is being taken away. So that's a point that I've ever had issues with. How about you, Sean? Is there anything that you would like to see changed, whether it's in the law, in the regs, or how they're being enforced?
I liked what Mr. Tobble had to say about not oversaturating the markets. I think that's important. So I do feel like they overissued licenses compared to what I would have liked to have seen, but I would like to see them give some time for the market to kind of mature and see how it actually does before they rush into handing out more licenses, and potentially go the route of increasing canopy sizes instead of issuing new licenses. And then of course the taxation part. And I agree with what you're saying, because that was a major part of pitching yourself to a local government, was that you're going to make them money. Now that's all stripped away, and it kind of, there's no real benefit for them other than local jobs and whatnot.
Right. And in your experience in working with the other states, were any of those other states, did they have saturated markets that you could, that you're drawing from that experience?
That's basically the downfall of every state, is I think the government gets too greedy on the licensing, and to them, it doesn't matter. They're pulling in taxes and whatnot. And then it really kind of just destroys the industry and doesn't make it worth even doing. And then people start trying to cheat the system to make money, and it kind of causes more problems than, creates problems ultimately.
How about you, Mark? I know you guys are still wrapping up, but what are you guys seeing that could be problematic, whether it's in the regs and the law, or even the enforcement? Because I always tell people, never discredit how rules and the law is being enforced.
Yeah, I personally can't talk too much to a lot of the topic here that we're talking, what we're speaking about. That's not really where I kind of fit within our business. I know a lot of that conversation obviously happens, and I'm included in those, but I'm really focused on the actual production of everything. So what I would say though is, going back to the good manufacturing practice and the certifications that we have and what we're trying to do, those are not things that are required, right? We're trying to get ahead of all of those things because we do feel that they will be required, right? So that's really important. As far as regulations, we want to self-impose a lot of those so that we're making really good, high quality, food safe gummies.
Yeah, because that's one of the issues that the low dose industry has had, is because technically under the law, they're not food. And so a lot of the food laws that would be for like a regular bakery don't come into play. But so you still use those as if they are going to
100%. Yep. Yeah, we've got hundreds of documents, policies, procedures that all feed into those. Excuse me. And they are what we live our lives by, right? It's as basic stuff like hand washing, wearing gloves when you're working at the food, smocks, hair nets, beard nets. I'm all in a get up when I go to work, right? Certain clothing that we should wear, hygiene, all those things that go into it, how we clean all of our food manufacturing, like, fastbacks, tables and our kettles and all those things. All of those are really important, but they're self-imposed as well.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have the time for. Thank you, gentlemen. That was awesome. Sean, Josh, and Mark, I greatly appreciate you chatting with me today.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're going to gather for our final panel. We're going to pull everybody together for the final panel. And know that there'll be time to mix and mingle after. One of the tenets of Fluence is that we start and we finish on time because time is valuable. And I want to introduce the final panel, which is the rapid growth of THC beverages. It's going to be moderated by Bruce Newstead from the Minnesota Retailers and the Alliance of Wisconsin Retailers, where he champions the interests of retailers across both states. He has a strong focus on policy and advocacy. He works to make sure that the retail sector thrives amidst evolving economic and legislative landscapes, of which we've heard nothing about today. Our first panelist is Elizabeth Anderson Schmidt. She's a passionate entrepreneur with proven track record of building and scaling brands. She's the founder of Fat Pants Brewing Company and Flying Cloud THC infused beverages. Fat Pants is a $3.9 million revenue business in under 4 years. And Flying Cloud THC infused beverages is generating at 1.7 million in its first year and now distributed across 600 stores in 5 states. Glenn McFellfresh works tirelessly for Plift, directing strong problem-solving, entrepreneurial, and relationship building skills towards bolstering team success. He's got a diverse background that includes competitive weightlifting, and he has first-hand experience at every level in the cannabis industry, from a bud tender to an executive to a founder. He specializes in both advocacy and execution and has successfully navigated the application process for licensing in multiple states across the country. Bruce, take it over.
Well, thanks, Boyce, and thanks to the audience for hanging around for really a great topic today, kind of a niche topic within the industry, but a big growing topic. So you're going to get the perspective of a couple of folks that are in there doing it every day. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what does the market look like today, what's a little bit of the regulatory landscape, what are some of the changes that might impact the market, and then we'll ask them to do some prognostication of the future of the market as well. So we'll cover a lot in the next 45 minutes or so. Before we get started though, Elizabeth, just give us a little bit of the background. Like, tell us where your perspective's coming from today. How did you get into THC beverages?
Yeah, so I started Fat Pants Brewing Company with my dad in November of 2019. That was not a very serendipitous time to open a brewery, but we made it through. We've been beverage people from the start, and you could say I was a little bit indulgent in college with my cannabis use. And my dad sat me down at one point, I think I was 20, 21, and he said, get off the weed and focus. And when low potency hemp bevs became gray area legal in Minnesota, I looked at him and I said, we should do weed. And I thought he would say no. And he looked at me and he said, we should do weed. And the first time I ever indulged in cannabis with my dad, it was over a low potency hemp beverage. And so now we have this passion for good beverages and combining cannabis and flavor together.
Thanks. So Glenn, give us a little bit of your background. What's the story behind Glenn?
Yeah, so the story for me here is I actually come from the cannabis industry. I got into the industry in 2013 when I was an entrepreneur and I just needed some cash. So I became a bud tender in Colorado, and then I ended up managing 2 stores. Then I worked for a cannabis tech company called Baker, where I was fortunate enough to experience hypergrowth. So I installed these e-commerce platforms that Josh was talking about. For about 6 years, we went from 30 stores using the software to like 1,600 in 2 years. It was a ludicrous experience. It was really, really fun. And then I got involved in the plant touching side again, where I toured facilities looking to buy them, but never pulled the trigger. And then I became the chief compliance officer of that company and was responsible for managing about $100 million in plant touching operations across Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Nevada, and California. So it was, I've seen it all, but there's something new I'm learning every day, and I'm realizing I haven't seen a thing. So it's the industry is ever changing.
And I work with retailers that have generally added this product to their line. We've seen a really solid consumer acceptance of the product. We've seen consumers come to grow to expect it alongside other beverages. Tell us a little bit, Glenn, keep the microphone. Tell us a little bit about kind of this boom we've seen, and why do you think the market has grabbed onto this specific beverage so greatly?
So I really think the key part with hemp beverages is two things. One, it's buying from trusted retail partners, right? I think it was also Josh that kind of had indicated that a lot of the previous dispensaries in a bunch of these other markets are relegated to these industrial zones, right? Where you're going somewhere where there's a guy with a gun in a less than friendly retail environment being the only place that you can buy THC products. Well, that changed, right? You're able to buy something from Surdix. You're able to buy something from Cub Foods, your local liquor store, your favorite restaurant, and your favorite brewery. And I think that there's a level of trust that dispensaries are just, a decade, sometimes 100 years behind that really accelerated this and made it so that it could go from a $0 to a $2 million line of business in a year. Like you can't fake that trust.
And Elizabeth, you just have such a unique perspective offering a craft brewery product as well as THC beverages. And I think we've seen some alcohol retailers report like some really strong sales. Sometimes 10, 20% of their inventory is THC beverages. What are you seeing and what do you think is the magic there?
Yeah, in the brewery itself, we're at about 12 to 15% that we sell of our revenues THC beverages now. We sell our own products. We also carry a couple of our colleagues' products, and people are really, taking to it. It is welcoming. It's flexible for people. It gives them an alternative where they can still have a social beverage while, maybe being a little bit more mindful about their consumption habits. And we've seen, primarily women really enjoying this product, especially, we call them the fun moms. And I think it's been a welcoming change as alcohol dips to have an alternative.
And we'll come back to demographics in a little bit, but just keep the microphone for a second. I want to chat a little bit about, we heard today how the market is going to change some way, shape, manner, or form when we get sort of full-scale recreational marijuana rollout. Kind of what are you thinking is going to happen to the THC beverage market? What are your plans going forward?
I see this as being something that is really sticky. I think it's going to stay regardless of adult use popping up. We're seeing this take off in states outside of Minnesota that have both adult use pre-existing and also states that don't have any legal recreational cannabis. I think Minnesota is a great incubator for this because of how strong our craft beer market was and how quickly craft breweries and craft distilleries jumped on this. There's a tremendous amount of innovation, and I think that agility and innovation is really what's going to propel this industry forward.
Glenn, what does your business plan look like going forward relative to changes in the market?
Oh, we couldn't be more excited about Minnesota. Like, Minnesota is core to our business, has been since day one, will continue to be for day 1 million. I think the transition to adult use is going to bring more opportunities than challenges. Like, I think we've all talked about the testing challenges, but there's 7 conditionally licensed analytical lab permits that are out there right now. So I think we'll get through that okay. And if not, Interim Director Taubel, the rest of the staff at the OCM, they're fantastic. They listen to the industry, right? They care about consumers. They're doing it the right way. I think the best part that's going to happen to this industry with adult use is just more awareness, right? There's going to be more news that's going to just be good for the hemp beverage industry and bring more awareness to consumers. Now, I do think that, again, I believe it was Josh, 3rd time in a row now, who said that there's going to be some hemp shops that I think are going to have a tough time, and I agree. And so, that is a portion of our business. So we're going to work with them to help them evolve through the market. But I think there's just going to be more economic activity in the state of Minnesota directly attributable to hemp and cannabis. It's going to be a great couple of years.
What are a few of those challenges, though, that you're thinking about in the plan? You're like, I'm going to make sure I'm staying on top of this. What are those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the ever-evolving regulatory environment. Like, we're always looking at the regs as they come out. We're looking at the law. We're working with the legislators to make sure that it gets changed. It's just normal business stuff in a highly regulated environment. I think one thing that we're actually excited for is Plift has a sub-brand called Rocket Fuel. And in states where we can have a higher potency product, we do have that. So we're looking, hey, how can we work with our partners on the dispensary side to launch a new product, right? That we couldn't sell to our partners like Cub Foods or Surdix because of legal reasons, but like we know we make great products. How do we toss that into another dispensary channel and just, show our support for the other side of the industry?
Elizabeth, same question. What are you kind of seeing as some of those challenges that you're playing on, trying to figure out how you get ahead of a little bit?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective on this as somebody who's done a lot of vertical integration with our brand. We are a retailer. We've self-distributed. We manufacture our own brand. And now we are proud brand owners. But access to capital has been really hard for brands. I think Josh had said it, there's not a lot of people that are looking to invest in this stuff anymore. So it is mostly friends and family that new brands are tapping into. Insurance remains a problem. It's been basically just 2025 that insurance companies have really started to consider risk assessment on this stuff and dipping their toes into underwriting policies for brands. And then payment processing has been another one. I've talked to a number of people who have had their payment processors kind of just slid out from under them. And that becomes dicey when you cannot collect payments to run your business.
Elizabeth, you mentioned demographics a little bit before. Give us your take both in sort of like your own sales internally, work with your retail partners. Is the consumer somebody who's new? Is it a new product for a consumer? Is it a substitute product? What do you kind of see in the continuum there?
So marketing has never really been my strong suit. This has been such a steep learning curve for me because when we rolled out our product, we really had to ask, like, who is this for? Who's going to like this? And the answer has been everybody to a degree. We have kind of found a niche for ourselves with the fun moms, and we've seen that as being our primary consumer. But I do see this as an introductory product to cannabis for people who have really felt that there's a lot of stigma to it. I mean, you can be discreet with a beverage, go out with your friends. Everybody's got a drink in their hand, and where you may not want wine, you can switch to a low potency opportunity. I know the question comes up quite a bit of, are regular cannabis users enjoying low potency hemp beverages? And in my social circle, yes, but I'm also, sub 30 female, and this has become a recreational option for me. But I know that every brand is seeing different demographics approach them based off of the kind of flavors and style that they're offering.
Glenn, are you seeing this as a new audience? I mean, it's a little special with Minnesota, so it's a new introduction of a whole product set, but is it a brand new audience or is it a complementary audience? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's like the biggest question right now. And so for a drink like Plift, like our whole mantra is premium look, premium taste, value, price. So what we find is that we're often not the first product that somebody tries, but we're like the second, third, or fourth, and we're the ones that people stick with. What we've always tried to do is make a product that tastes really good and is super affordably priced. And that means working really hard with our partners in the distribution channel and at the retail environment to make sure that our margins are properly aligned to like get that accessibility factor that we think is still really missing in this category. So for us, like it's very much somebody is, already consuming THC, but then they're going with Plift. I think more broadly, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of people who are they're a totally new beverage consumer. Like me, I'm a great example. Like I don't drink alcohol that often. I don't really drink many canned products, but I love these drinks. And so there's so many people like me that have, I enjoyed alcohol a lot in college. I went to UW, so we know what we're doing down there. But when I kind of got into young adulthood, it just didn't serve my needs. So being able to go to a bar and spend $100 on THC drinks is something I couldn't imagine doing in anywhere else. And now it's like literally happening in every state we're in. I mean, Plift is in almost 20 states, and some of those states don't allow on-premise consumption, and bless you, but many do, and I think there's so many new people who are like, oh my goodness, so happy I can finally spend money at a bar again instead of just buying a mocktail for $13 and being like, well, the value isn't there, so I'm not going to buy more than one.
When Blois asked if I moderate this, I had one question that came to my mind, so I'm going to actually ask it right up front, and we'll get to regulatory environment in just a minute. But I'm curious, and it goes back to the question earlier of 1,000 milligrams. What are some of the format changes we might see? I know this is kind of a difficult question, but I think of that in like, is there a beverage that's more fast acting, more long lasting? What are some of the format things we might see change in the THC beverage area?
That's a really good question. And so in addition to being one of the co-founders of Plift, I'm also one of the co-founders of Perfectly Dosed, and we make the water-soluble cannabinoids that go in about 50 or 60% of the market. And I can tell you that we're doing a lot of R&D, and I know some of our competitors are as well, on modifying the onset time, modifying the duration of the high. But I think really what we're going to see next, and this is actually a huge booming subcategory within hemp beverages across the country, is this concept of a large format beverage. So right now, that's currently not legal in Minnesota. We're working on that. Would love to talk with everyone about that later on. But imagine a spirit style bottle, right? Where you have this gorgeous bottle of 750 ml, and instead of it being one serving like a can, you have maybe, let's call it 10, or well, it would be like about 16 servings of 2.5, 5, or 10 milligram drinks, and that's this whole new category of the market that currently is not available for sale in Minnesota. So I think that's going to be huge. We haven't seen any products in plastic bottles yet, so think sport drinks. I think that's going to be something, and I'm seeing a huge blow up of all these functional beverages. So think Breeze or other products that have these adaptogens that are maybe not intoxicating, but have some sort of benefit that's going to promote focus or energy or rest. I think we'll see a lot more of that, but I think large format is going to be, at least by revenue, the next biggest thing.
I have a brother-in-law who's got a beautiful liquor cabinet, but what it doesn't have is a mixer. It doesn't have, that makes sense.
You nailed it.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what's your take on kind of format changes or things that we might see coming out?
I'd really love to see more full spectrum, and I know that phrase gets tossed around quite liberally, but more full spectrum beverages that really embrace multiple cannabinoids in them and not just THC. I'm a big believer in the entourage effect of combining all these cannabinoids together. I think that it creates a better user experience, and I think users will begin to demand a better experience as this market matures and as they get more access to adult use. Also agree with Glenn. Large format is going to be a really cool opportunity. I also think small format, like shot bottle size products, would be an awesome opportunity to have, but I think large format is going to be my primary focus as somebody who's dipping their toes into legislative work.
Go for it.
I totally agree with Elizabeth. The concept of full spectrum products is something that Rep. Nolan West, along with Rep. Zach Stevenson, championed not this previous legislative session, but the prior one. And there's this huge opportunity to, I think, cross-pollinate with the dispensary market even more by these full spectrum products. Because right now what most folks are using are pure distillate or isolate-based products. And while that does a really good job of knowing that the THC is going to feel consistent from batch to batch to batch, I think consumers want something that is a little bit variable. That's kind of the fun part about cannabis when you smoke it, is that you never really know, there's a little bit of variability there. And sometimes that sucks, right? Because getting too high is not fun. And same with not getting as high as you want. But with these drinks, you're able to kind of, I think, solve that problem too, because you know that no matter what, we're going to have a pretty tight band of those full spectrum cannabinoids because the emulsion is tested prior to adding it to the drink. But I think you're right. I think we'll see this resurgence of focusing on the plant type products that currently doesn't exist today.
Let's dive into regulatory just a little bit, but let's look at it from a market perspective. And I think all of us agree, safety along with responsiveness to consumer, you can balance those two. Minnesota, definitely a pioneer in this space. There's no doubt about it, which is why we have pioneers in this space. What are some of your takeaways from other states? Are there some things that other states are doing that you're like, you know what, we could get that better or more right, or we should try that? Are there any of those pieces where you're like, yeah, we could learn a lesson there?
Honestly, Minnesota has done such a good job, considering that this state was the first. It's stunning with about how much was done well. And I know that for many of us that were here, the work that went into that, I'm getting goosebumps right now just from thinking about how much work we all did. I'm looking at so many of you and you, right? And you, and there was so much that was done well. I think what other states are doing right, though, that we could learn from is taxing appropriately. Again, I understand the state is in the position it's in, and we got to all work together to get through this, but let's be a little bit more collaborative in this upcoming session about ways that we can work to maybe find more effective ways to tax certain categories of this product. Large format would be a great taxable source. I think that maybe doing more to help hemp beverages grow. Elizabeth hit the nail on the head. It's really hard to raise money in this industry. And I think we're missing out on a whole category of entrepreneurs, some from impacted communities, some from just, like great idea makers that maybe just don't have the means to start a business. I think we could see a lot more homegrown heroes kind of start if we just help provide the seed capital to get that done. Honestly, beyond that, I think the interesting thing will be some of the potency conversations that maybe happen in subsequent years, but I don't think that's changing anytime soon. Minnesota did a really good job. I work in about a dozen different states on the legislative side. I'm just continually amazed by how really good Minnesota did on, frankly, the first stab.
Elizabeth, remind us how many states you're selling into, and are there any takeaways from those states?
Yeah, so I'm in about 10 now. We're in about 10 now, which is a steep learning curve. Minnesota really has set the tone. I've been very fortunate to have cut my teeth here with all the work that everybody's done and just paved the way. I feel a little bit bad having ridden on the cart, now hoping to pull the cart a little bit more. But I think my only concern as somebody who runs an on-premise location is there's some confusing language coming out in terms of whether or not, there's liability legally if somebody comes in and they maybe have had a hemp beverage somewhere else and I serve them a beer, or if, I serve them a hemp beverage and they've been drinking on the boat all day. It's a little confusing as a retailer, as an on-prem retailer. I know that they're working on it though. And I will say OCM has been incredibly responsive to concerns, and I could not, clap for them loud enough. I know they get dragged online a lot. So
Elizabeth, keep the microphone. So I think that the future of this segment of the industry will be heavily impacted by what happens in St. Paul and what happens in Washington, D.C. Do you agree with that? And if you do, or even if you don't, kind of what are you worried about coming out of one of those two, or what are you excited about coming out of one of those two areas?
Well, I know the Farm Bill is currently up for debate, or imminently up for debate on what's really going to happen with hemp. I do think it's here to stay. I think you can't unring that bell. It's just too popular at this point. I look forward to, the conversations coming out of St. Paul to really set the tone for that. And I know that people do have their eyes on the state to kind of lead the charge. It was so successful to see this rolled out. And by and large, from my perspective, it was rolled out really well, both from a manufacturer standpoint. I think everybody saw this as our opportunity to just do it well, because we had a really limited shot. And if we were putting out bathtub brews that were all over the place in terms of milligrams and safety, it was going to tank it. And people really respected that. And they did that. And now other states are looking at it like, okay, I think this could be safe. And we could see this impactful in both an economic sense and also a step forward into legalizing cannabis on a state-by-state patchwork level, but maybe hopefully someday a federal level.
Well, keep the mic for just a second. I'm glad you said the word patchwork. So working in 10 states, what kind of challenge is that for you? And is there a way to help fix that?
We've had to pivot a lot. The milligram size changes state over state has been pretty crazy. Florida's regulations on food coloring in products and characters on cans has been crazy. If I may say, a little hypocritical. Coming from the beer industry, even I can put a cartoon on a beer can and sell it in Total Wine, but if I do it on THC, my products will get yanked immediately. Connecticut has been challenging. They're extremely stringent upon their licensing requirements. The patchwork makes sense because nothing is moving on a federal level. It is difficult as a brand owner, and it's really difficult as a manufacturer.
Clint, let's go back to St. Paul and Washington, D.C. Anything that you think is going to come out of there that's concerning you or might be an opportunity? And then we'll talk about patchwork.
Yeah, I think there's already a lot of concerns in Washington, D.C. right now, right? You have the appropriations bill that is, in various stages of progress in both the House and the Senate. And in both versions of those bills are similar, but thankfully slightly different language that would effectively ban the entire intoxicating hemp category, soup to nuts. Obviously, there's nobody up here, at least, that wants to see that happen. And I would imagine that everyone here like regardless of where you're at in the industry, doesn't want to see that happen because we all have friends in that industry. That sucks. There's really no way around that. But you know, I do believe that there's great conversations happening. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge that, you know, intoxicating hemp beverages manufactured and sold in these highly regulated environments is like a vanishingly small subset of the larger intoxicating hemp industry. And that's got some pros, which are there's people who have a lot more at stake working federally. But it also has some cons, which means there's some really bad actors that are making a ton of money that are making it harder for all of us who are trying to do it the right way to do it the right way and continue to exist. So I think at the federal level, you know, I don't see hemp beverages going away. I think, you know, there's talks of these beverage carve-outs, which again have pros and cons. I don't know if there's a lot of validity to it. And frankly, the hemp beverage category doesn't have enough money to lobby effectively at the federal level. And I think that's part of the problem, right? Is we have to find powerful allies like our friends that run retail, you know, big retail and are big, you know, beer, wine, and spirits wholesalers, or are these large organizations that see hemp beverages and maybe even hemp gummies as a real opportunity for growth. In St. Paul, you know, I think, gosh, I feel sorry for Minnesota's elected officials. They work so hard, and it has been a hard couple of years for them. Ever since I've gotten involved in Minnesota politics in 2023, like I've just been so impressed with how much stuff those folks have to deal with up there. So I don't really have any concerns. I think it's more just going to be how do we make sure that as an industry, we always come together and share what's really important, talk about it amongst ourselves. I think there's a really great core group of people that do that. So not really too much of a concern. It's just always making sure that we're doing the boring stuff, doing the legwork and like meeting and talking and hashing it out and then going to the folks that matter with a plan that really works.
All right. Glenn, just thinking about retailers, and what we hear sometimes is there's retailers that are doing it right, working with great partners, following all the rules, and sometimes there's a segment of the economy that isn't. What do you see in the THC beverage space relative to sort of responsible activity versus, I guess I'll call it irresponsible activity?
That's a great question. So, you know, I'm going to start by talking about Minnesota retailers and then expand it to maybe some of what we're seeing nationally. So in Minnesota, I'd say like 99% of our retail partners are doing things the right way. And I think the data bears that out, right? I've seen only 1 or 2 product recalls by the OCM, and one was for, I think, a mushroom company that had a national recall. And then there was another one, I think someone was selling like overpotency products. And I'm sure there were more, but like the fact that that's all we have, like, is a true testament to how much everybody is at least giving the old good college try to like, let's do this the right way. No complaints about Minnesota. You have Total Wine leading the charge, Cub Foods, Surdix. Like there's hundreds of retailers that are doing a great job here. I think what you're seeing kind of outside of Minnesota is where a lot of the problems are, right? Like we're sold in a lot of markets where the best selling products are 50, 100 milligram products. And that's just hard to compete with. And again, I think one thing that I've had to come around on is that like there's a consumer for that, and we shouldn't judge them because they consume more than what a lot of people in this room would find as an enjoyable serving size, right? In the same way someone pours a double, like that'll knock me on my ass. But like for someone here, we could all be like, oh, double's easy. I think the biggest thing is just making sure that you're selling good products, right? People that sell these products that look like they're appealing to kids, like I really struggle to connect that to an economic outcome, but we're seeing that go away as more real retailers enter the segment.
Elizabeth, before we leave this area, you mentioned packaging and patchwork. Give us just the quick state today. Is it easy to package? Like, can you produce one package that works in all the 10 states you're in right now, or is that difficult?
No, I have to produce like 4 different package sizes right now. It makes SKU variation really challenging. So we've had to be really strategic in terms of what we're putting out in the market, in that it's both going to connect with our consumer and our key demographic, and it's going to be, you know, appealing to the regulators that are in that state. The new thing that's coming out that I actually really wholeheartedly agree with as a parent myself is child-proof packaging. If this stuff is on shelves in grocery stores, in liquor stores, which I would hope there's no kids in liquor stores, but in grocery stores and gas stations and easily accessible retail places like we want it to be, we need to be doing it safely and effectively. So we're transitioning almost our entire line, all of our SKUs, to child-resistant lids and packaging like that.
Awesome. Keep the microphone for a second. We'll kind of transition a little bit out of regulatory and into the market a little bit more. But you've got this unique perspective in that you're a craft brewer and you're a THC beverage manufacturer. And there are certain rules in the alcohol industry, and they've existed for a long time. And there's some tiers there, and that seems to work. This doesn't operate within that same system. Just talk a little bit about what are the advantages and disadvantages of that.
We started as a self-distribution model, and God bless anyone else who's trying that. It's hard. Oh my gosh. But we've really enjoyed adapting our business to that 3-tier model, and embracing, leaning on distribution partners. I think they are some of the loudest proponents of this category. We've enjoyed our relationships with them and the help that they've provided us, and then our retail partnerships as well. So it's different, but I think the model that was set by beer is a good model to follow.
Glenn, what's your perspective?
My perspective on alcohol and THC beverages is that if we, by and large, everybody's saying we want to be regulated like alcohol, well, then that means you're going to have to be regulated like alcohol, right? And I think what we're hearing in the industry, some of the louder voices in the room are like, well, I want to be regulated like alcohol, but I don't want to do that, or I don't want to do that. And, I think it's hard to have your cake and eat it too. But I firmly believe that everything that applies to alcohol should in some way, shape, or form apply to hemp. I think there's good conversations to be had about tax rate. Like, I think we should have this tax like beer and not like spirits. But prohibitions on e-commerce, I think, should make sense with what the state has done. But beer, alcohol, and THC beverages, in my opinion, are going to be on the same trucks, on the same tap. Well, maybe not the same taps, but the same cans and the same lines for the next, hopefully, 1,000 years. So we should get used to kind of operating within the confines of the alcohol system.
Let's talk about another little pivot for the industry. So a hemp-derived beverage versus a full cannabis-derived beverage. What do you see? What are you thinking about that? How might you approach that, or how might that change the industry you're in right now?
Right. So, I think from a market perspective, I view it as entirely complementary, right? Like, I'm not worried about like our retail partners, many of your members, like not carrying Plift anymore. I'm not worried about them opening a dispensary because they're going to be targeting totally different consumers, right? So I think if anything, what we'll see is, and this almost pains me to say, but I think we'll see a little bit of the validation of the hemp market as being the way to go. I come from the cannabis industry. I spent like 9 years in this highly regulated environment. I came to hemp intentionally. And I think that you have folks like Josh who have been doing it the right way, and folks like Mark, like you're carving out these niches, right, that make a ton of sense. But for every 2 of you that are in this industry, there's unfortunately like 20 or 30 that don't have such a dialed in plan, that haven't been working since 2009. Like, that's wild. And those people are probably going to run into a wrecking ball that happens in every market. And I think, that's not to say that there won't be THC beverages or other hemp products that run into that same wrecking ball. But I think it'll unfortunately be a little bit more visible because of the highly visible nature of the cannabis industry.
Elizabeth, any thoughts on that relative to potential changes to the market or how you're looking at it?
I don't really have a whole lot of background in this. I've been steeped in hemp this whole time. So we've definitely had people approach us as a manufacturer to ask, could you make a cannabis beverage? And right now the answer is no. I see it as an exciting opportunity. I don't know that it'll have the same velocity that hemp has had. But there's so much room in this industry as a whole for new products and new opportunities that I wouldn't shy away from it.
Keep my phone for a second. In the markets that you're working in, and I'm just purely curious, is there a different urban versus non-urban marketing strategy, or is this product truly sort of universal relative to how it appeals to a consumer?
So good question, because we talk about this a lot internally, because we make sodas and they're very sweet and they have high fructose corn syrup in them. They're very popular in rural markets. We don't play as well in urban markets, but I think that's because urban markets are really leaning like more health conscious, and something that is like a seltzer based or lightly flavored, lightly sugared beverage is going to play a lot better. We do see just data wise that this is popular in urban, in rural, in suburban markets. You get a really wide net of people that are cannabis curious, that are adopting this, and people that have been lifelong cannabis consumers that maybe got away from it when they had kids and got serious about a job and things like that, that are coming back and saying, this is my 6-pack for the night, my 4-pack for the night. So I think we're seeing a wide net of adoption with this.
Glenn, any differences in how you approach a consumer?
Well, I come from a proud family of hillbillies, and we are.
That's going to end up as a clip somewhere.
And I hope it does, right? Represent, right? But, I only say that because it's important. Accessibility has always been very core to the Pliff brand, right? And, when we got started, it was very clear to us that everyone is targeting this ultra premium consumer that really only lives in this urban or ex-urban or suburban environment, and that the rural consumer has often been underregulated. So we've invested pretty significantly in our partnership with some of the more outstate Minnesota wholesalers, because those folks shouldn't miss out on affordable THC beverage options and affordable THC products, just because that's not necessarily where all the money is right now. So for us, that's always been core to it. Obviously, folks like Elizabeth shared those values, and there's a couple other brands out there too that are really making a push in the rural environment. But I think it's also looking at, are the rural consumers necessarily consuming these low potency products? They're not. One thing I've actually learned is with our 25 milligram drink in other states, that does not stay on shelves in rural environments. It is gone the day that the case is dropped. And I think a lot of that has to do with maybe higher alcohol consumption rates, maybe higher consumption of other drugs. I hear from a lot of folks that when they're consuming these higher potency products, they're in the process of reducing their alcohol consumption, which could have been problematic, or reducing the use of opiates. And, it blows my mind that the same stories that I heard when I was a bud tender 10 years ago are the same stories that I'm hearing again with, Pliff and THC beverages.
Kind of along those lines, just out of curiosity, as you look at market adoption, and are we oversaturated in the market? What's your sense of product availability? Are we oversaturated, or are we doing okay?
I love that question. And what I like to remind people is that there's 15,000 whiskey brands right now in the United States. And I think by any other measure there's finding data in the hemp beverage industry is a huge pain. We can talk about that at some other time, but there's maybe 1,100 brands. Let's call it 1,500, right? Be generous. So we're at maybe 10% of alcohol saturation. And I don't think we're oversaturated. I do think that there's a lot of similarity between consumers. Is there really that much difference between one Arnold Palmer versus another Arnold Palmer versus a third Arnold Palmer? Maybe, maybe not. But that shouldn't stop folks from entering. I think there's still so much opportunity for people to get into the space. I think that differentiating yourself and innovating to find something that resonates with the consumer is what makes this hemp beverage industry so beautiful. So I don't think we're even close to being fully saturated. But I do think that what is on our retail partners to do is to not be afraid to disco products that are not selling, right? I think that, the biggest issue that I see across every market is somebody holding proud to a product they bought that just isn't moving. And because this category is so new, the retailers, unfortunately, are going to have a couple of misses. And that means just discoing that product, getting it out the door, and finding the next big hit, right? That next product could be the White Claw THC, for all anyone knows.
Right. Elizabeth, perspective on that?
I think there's still so much white space to be tapped with this. I mean, there's format sizing that has yet to really bloom. There's flavor profiles that have yet to really bloom. I think this is going to be the next center of innovation in beverages, that and non-alcoholic bevs in general, because there's so much demand for that right now. And I know that we see, and Glenn probably sees this as well, retailers are starting to take more and more shelf space over from alcohol to fill their shelves with THC beverages. So while you may walk in and it might feel overwhelming because there's so many brands, like you said, there's thousands and thousands of brands of each kind of liquor, and there's so much opportunity to experiment with this space to find the next big thing.
I want to kind of shift to that future of the market just a little more in our last 10 or 15 minutes, but I'll just take a quick pause, see if there's any audience questions at this moment. All right, let's go back to the Farm Bill just a second, just so we reemphasize the moment that we're in. What are you telling your customers, your retail partners, your supplier? What are you telling them relative to this moment in time, and what they could do to help out?
Advocacy. If you like the product, talk about it. Share that with your representatives. People need to hear about this. I recently spoke to one of our local representatives who had no idea just how deep hemp beverages really went and how expansive they really were. And so there's a lot of education to be done. Maybe a little bit like too blasé about it, but I'm not concerned. A little concerned, but I think that this just has to be a really collaborative effort. There are so many spokes of this wheel of people that it touches: manufacturers, brand owners, founders, people that produce the plant, people that manufacture the distillate or the emulsion that we use. And it's going to have to be everybody pushing forward for like broad scope before everybody gets exactly what they want out of legislation. And so just like somebody had said earlier, this is going to be something that we talk about year after year after year and refining what that means. And hopefully we get to a point where it is not state by state, but right now it's going to have to be that heavy lift, heavy haul, state by state, and getting involved wherever you have skin in the game.
Glenn, what are you telling your employees, your customers, your partners?
That's a great question. So we're telling our employees, like, look, this is 90% of my job, right? So I am super engaged on the legislative side of things, and it's because like I owe that to my employees, right? And they know that the work that we're doing is industry leading. We tell our partners to do the exact same thing that Elizabeth just said. You need to talk to your regulators. You need to talk to your elected officials, right? I mean, there's a reason that like we talk to you regularly, right? We talked to Bob Galligan back there, executive or head of government affairs for the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. And it's, my voice is pretty quiet, but your voice is a little bit louder. Your members' voices together is actually pretty loud. And so engaging people that are higher leverage than me or you, that's not to say we're low leverage, it's just y'all are much higher leverage, is a huge part of it. And, personally, my business does not do business with folks that are not engaged on the policy side. That's just a policy that we have. And we've switched can vendors, right? We've switched label makers. If you're going to make money off of this and you're not going to help contribute to the industry, I have a huge problem with that when I spend so much time and have so many gray hairs because of all the stress that has become. And look, I'm not expecting everyone to do that, but it's, core to our DNA as a company at Plift and Perfectly Dosed. And I think for that reason, our customers and partners and employees are, understand the risk, but also like you, my concern is under control right now.
Glenn, let's go to kind of like, what do you see take yourself and your operation up, think about the industry at large. What's the future of this industry in Minnesota? Are we still in a fast growth period? Are we in a level? What's kind of the future?
I think it's going to look stepwise.
Okay.
So I'm a math major, right? That's what I learned at UW. And I think we're going to continue to see this rapid growth, right? I was talking to a big retailer the other day and he said, Glenn, you know what? Sales have really leveled out for this category. And so what I told him and what he told me is, so we're focusing on activating the 4 out of 5 consumers that haven't yet tried a THC beverage that walk through this individual store, right? That's still a lot of market to attack, right? If we've only penetrated, let's call it 20% at best at a very well-known retailer, like we got a lot of opportunity there. I think the next stage is going to look like, hey, how many of you all shop at Costco, right? Like imagine when you can buy a THC beverage at Costco. That is coming. Right. Same with Target. And again, I can't speak to any of these businesses individually, but I can speak to them generically as like large retail is very much engaged in the category. And whenever that happens, I don't think there's really any THC beverage that's truly prepared for that level of scale, right? Where you're talking $1 million POs on a monthly basis or more. And, I think that's a good thing because nobody like the thing about Costco and Target is when you launch with them and if you screw it up, you probably don't get another chance. So as the industry is really continuing to mature and understand how much scale we truly need in order to support a national launch, like we're really benefiting from the opportunity to retrench, to understand how do we handle going from a $1 million a year to a $10 million a year business, and then from a $10 million a year business to a $100 million a year business. So the timing is good.
Elizabeth, thoughts on where the industry is going? And maybe just to piggyback on what Glenn was talking about, certainly large-scale retail partners are important. I imagine kind of micro retailers and small outlets are important too. But what do you kind of see as the future for this industry?
I think everybody is kind of taking a beat right now, as in this state specifically, as like true licensing starts to bubble up at the end of the summer here. And we're looking back and we're going, okay, we've come this far. What's next? And Minnesota really is the pioneer market for all of this stuff. And we're taking a lot of what we learned here and implementing it in other states in terms of our own personal brand. Where do I think it's going to go? That is a great question. I don't know. I think it's going to go up from here. Like Glenn said, there's so many people who haven't tried these beverages yet. I think the beverages are going to be refined even more. I think we're going to see better branding. Right now, marketing is exceptionally hard. There's a lot of restrictions on digital marketing for this stuff. So we're not even tapping into certain consumer bases right now. And so as things start to break open, there will probably be a couple new iterations of resurgence in this category. And I hope that we see more brands pop up and we get more consumer variety and we let the consumers really choose the direction that this industry is going to go.
Yeah, I want to end with what I think is kind of the toughest question. And keep the microphones. Let's stick with you. I mean, we'd love to see things growing here in Minnesota and take effect elsewhere. I mean, there's just some magic to your local economy. It spurs entrepreneurship. There's feeder industries. There's just some magic. As Boys Punch, we get an affinity for Wisconsin too. We love Wisconsin. But it's great to see like an industry be born out of Minnesota, thrive out of Minnesota, you know, and kind of just keep that upward momentum as long as you can until you see other players in the marketplace. Is there like one or two things we could do here in this state that would continue to propel this industry to be a market leader? I said it was a big question.
Here's where I complain about taxes. No, I do think the tax burden is going to limit some of the innovation and growth here with some of the homegrown brands. I think so many of you in this audience know this. It's so hard to start a business and to run a business and to grow a business. And when, you know, understandably, when the government kind of steps in and has to implement some barriers, some caps on that with taxation or regulation, they're big hurdles. So I would love to see, as OCM really comes into full bloom, maybe more workability there, especially with like our legislators and understanding that these are different times for starting new ventures. I don't know. I'm babbling.
No, it's a good response. I mean, I think, and I just to touch on something you just said, like there is, ignorance isn't the right word because that's not unflattering, but there are so many things that we all don't know. And there are a lot of legislators who don't understand your industry, your segment, and there's work to be done there. There's no doubt about it. And we have to have folks that understand the industry to help continue to propel that industry. Glenn, what's your thoughts on how we keep this thing going?
So I'm going to go back to 2022 and 2023 for a sec, because I think for everybody that was there was like this energy in the air. There was a magnetism, just like, I think everybody realized we're doing something crazy, something for the first time. And that was fun. And because of that, you had all these brands that just blew up, right? Like you had Trail Magic come out of nowhere and then they're in every Muni in like 6 months. You had, like Schmazy, right? And you have all of these other brands that just like kind of came out of nowhere. And a big part of that was because the press, the media really like became a part of the story. They talked about the stories. And look, not all that media coverage was necessarily flattering or fun or about the good stuff, but like there was a level of media coverage that I have not seen matched again in any single state. And I think that, you know, that's why events like this are so good, because it gives, it's something to talk about, right? It makes sure that hemp beverages stay in the zeitgeist. So I think that's going to be part of it. And some of that's incumbent on us as brands. Some of that's incumbent upon retailers to like recognize that that's good for business too. You know, having 20% market penetration is nothing compared to beer, which like who doesn't know what beer is? So we have that to do. Outside of that, I mean, I think it's going to continue to be here in Minnesota, at least a big part of these local municipalities to realize that everyone in their community knows somebody that likes these drinks. So let's not overregulate them or regulate them away, or find ourselves in a situation where the consumer access is limited beyond the same level of consumer access limitations that exist on alcohol.
Well, I just want to wrap up by thanking Lois and Paul and Briggs and the team at Fluence for hosting this conversation. And mostly I want to thank you for taking the risk that you do every day on the hope that there's a reward there. And let's keep doing what we can to keep a good environment in place so you can continue to succeed and others can succeed as well.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And thanks to Paul, Blois, Briggs, and all of you here in the audience today, in person and online. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks a ton.
Thank you.
Great job. So it's
Thank you.
fun to hear your perspective. Yeah, and thanks for kind of laying it out there too. That's not easy.
I love it, man. It's terrible. I mean,
It's not easy.